The cruelest promises are not broken loudly. They are polished first. Ava Bennett learned that in the royal hall before the kingdom arrived, before the trumpets, before the silver banners were lowered from the high balconies, before Alpha King Rowan Whitlock stood beneath the Ashford crest and chose another woman with the calm face of a man who believed loyalty could survive anything. Ava stood alone near the center aisle with a guest list in one hand and a folded healer seating chart in the other. The hall was enormous in the blue-gray light before ceremony. Black marble floors, moonstone pillars, silver wolf banners, rows of polished benches waiting for nobles, soldiers, healers, widows, merchants, and every important house that wished to witness the announcement of Ashford's future Luna. Future Luna. The words had been written on every invitation. Not her name. Never her name. Only the title. As if the kingdom already knew a woman was coming, and Ava had simply not been told which one. She adjusted the healer section first. The old physicians needed seats near the side doors in case someone fainted during the crowding. The injured veterans needed the second row, not the third, because too many stairs would make Captain Morris's knee swell by evening. The widows from the southern border needed to sit together, away from the families who still blamed their husbands for surviving when others did not. Ava knew these things. No one had asked how. No one ever did. They only gave her lists and expected the hall to function. She crossed out one name, moved another, then gave the corrected page to a young attendant. "Make sure Mrs. Hale is not seated beside Lord Benton," Ava said softly. Her son died under his command. The attendant blinked. "That is not in the seating notes." "I know." The girl hurried away. Ava watched her go, then turned toward the treaty banners. 3 were misaligned. Of course they were. The northern delegation would notice if their banner hung lower than the western one. The council would call it trivial. The ambassador would not. Men who signed peace often measured disrespect in inches. Ava climbed the small platform herself and straightened the silver cord. Her pale blue dress caught slightly on the edge of the wood. It was plain for such a day. Soft fabric. No jewels. No royal embroidery. Nothing that could be mistaken for claim. Only one thing on her body did not belong to invisibility. The Luna ring, hidden beneath her glove. Rowan had given it to her 3 winters ago in the West Corridor after the border war, when the palace still smelled of smoke and medicine. He had placed the ring in her palm, not on her finger. "Not yet," he had said. His voice had been low, exhausted, almost tender. "When the kingdom is ready." Ava had believed him. That was the dangerous thing about private promises. They felt sacred because no one else could damage them. She touched the ring now through the glove. A secret circle of silver against her skin. Not worn publicly. Not blessed by council. Not named before the kingdom. Still, she had carried it like a future. Behind her, servants rolled in the royal carpet. A seamstress hurried past with a silver veil in her arms. 2 guards lifted the Ashford crown stand into place near the throne steps. Ava's hand stilled. Silver veil. Crown stand. Royal carpet. Too much ceremony for a simple announcement. Too much silver for uncertainty. A cold line moved through her chest. She looked toward the Luna dais. Beside Rowan's black throne, a second chair had been placed. Not the small advisor's chair she usually used during working councils. A Luna chair. Carved ashwood. Silver back. Blue velvet cushion. Prepared. Polished. Waiting. Ava descended from the platform slowly. Her body understood before her heart allowed it. Someone had ordered that chair. Someone had approved the veil. Someone had chosen the silver. And no one had come to tell the woman wearing the hidden ring. "Ava." Rowan's voice came from the eastern arch. She turned. Alpha King Rowan Whitlock stood at the entrance to the hall in a black formal coat. Dark hair brushed back. Face handsome and unreadable. Power sat on him easily. It always had. Even when war had nearly broken him. Even when fever had made his hands shake. Even when he had leaned against Ava in the healer wing and whispered that she was the only steady thing left. Today, he looked steady without her. That hurt more than weakness ever had. "Your Majesty," she said. Once, he had disliked that title from her in private. Now he did not react. His gaze moved over the hall, not her. "Is everything prepared?" "Yes." "The healer seats were wrong. I corrected them. The treaty banners are balanced now." "Good. Good." One word for years of knowing what his counsel forgot. Rowan stepped farther inside. He did not ask whether she had eaten. He did not ask why she was wearing gloves in a warm hall. He did not ask if the announcement had frightened her. He looked toward the Luna chair. Ava watched his face. Nothing changed. That was the answer. The kingdom will arrive within the hour, he said. I know. The ceremony must look controlled. It will. He finally looked at her. For a brief moment, something moved in his eyes. Not guilt. Not enough. Ava, he said lower. Her heart betrayed her by listening. Then a guard entered behind him and bowed. Your Majesty, Lady Isabella Crane has arrived. The name moved through the hall like a door closing. Ava's fingers tightened around the guest list. Rowan turned immediately. Bring her through the north entrance. The council will meet us there. Us. A small word. A fatal one. The guard left. Rowan looked back at Ava. You should finish the final arrangements. The sentence was ordinary. That was its cruelty. Ava nodded once. Yes, Your Majesty. He left through the arch without touching her, without explaining the silver veil, without looking at the glove that hid the ring he had once pressed into her palm when no one was watching. When his footsteps faded, the hall seemed larger, colder. Ava stood below the Luna chair and opened the guest list again. The letters blurred for one breath. Only one. Then she forced them clear. There was still work to do. The kingdom would come. The banners would hang correctly. The widows would sit where grief would not be insulted. The healers would have side access. The ceremony would look flawless. Because for years, Ava Bennett had been trusted with everything except being chosen. She finished marking the final page, folded it neatly, and handed it to the steward. Then, alone beneath the silver banners, she touched the hidden Luna ring one last time and understood that some promises did not break when spoken aloud. Some broke quietly, in the hands of the woman still preparing the room where they would be betrayed. For 3 years, Ava Bennett had lived inside the word soon. Soon, Rowan said, when the palace still smelled of blood and smoke after the border war. Soon, when the council stops measuring every breath I take. Soon, when the northern houses settle. Soon, when Ashford is strong enough to accept what I already know. Ava had believed him because belief was easier than admitting a private promise could become a cage. The first time he said it, he was half-conscious in the healer wing, his black hair damp with fever, one hand gripping hers as if the world had narrowed to the warmth of her palm. The war had taken too much from him. Men, sleep, patience, the softer parts of his voice. Ava had sat beside him through 6 nights while healers moved in and out, carrying basins, bandages, silver thread, and bad news. Rowan had refused every sleeping draft until she brewed one herself, bitter and dark, with the exact amount of moonroot his wolf could tolerate. He drank it because she lifted the cup. No one else could make him. On the 7th night, when the fever broke, he opened his eyes and whispered, "When this kingdom stands again, you will stand beside me." Ava had not asked for witnesses. That was her first mistake. She had only held his hand more tightly and let the words become sacred because they had been spoken in pain. After that, she began doing the work before anyone gave it a name. At dawn, she read healer reports and marked which wounded soldiers needed compensation before their pride kept them from asking. By noon, she corrected treaty drafts so Rowan's temper did not become border policy. At night, she rewrote widow letters in a voice that sounded less like marble and more like a human being had signed them. She became the quiet space between Rowan's crown and the people it might crush by accident. No official title, no public chair, no Luna blessing. Only the hidden ring in her drawer, then under her glove, then against her skin like a future that kept asking her to wait. The court noticed her work only when it failed to appear early enough. Ava, the envoy list. Ava, the healer routes. Ava, His Majesty needs the Western casualty numbers softened. Ava, always her name when something needed saving. Never her name when the room spoke of honor. Rowan did not ignore her completely. That would have been easier to survive. There were small moments that kept hope alive cruelly. His hand at the small of her back in empty corridors, gone before anyone turned. His cloak around her shoulders during winter inspections, removed when the council approached. His voice late at night, rough with exhaustion, saying, "I do not know what I would do without you." She had heard love in that. Now, standing beneath silver banners prepared for another woman, Ava could hear the truer shape. "I do not know what I would do without your labor. I do not know what I would do without your silence. I do not know what I would do if you asked me to become brave in public. The lunar ring had been given to her privately during the third winter. Not in the throne room. Not before the moon altar. In the west corridor, after a council session where Elder Warren had suggested Rowan needed a visible future to calm the kingdom. Rowan had found Ava outside the archive, holding a stack of patrol reports. His face had been tight with the kind of anger he allowed only when no one important watched. "They want a performance," he had said. Ava had tried to smile. Most kingdoms do. He had taken the ring from his coat. Silver. Black moonstone. Ashford wolves carved along the inner band. Her breath had stopped. Rowan placed it in her palm and closed her fingers around it. "Not yet," he said. "But this is mine to give when the time is right." She should have asked when. She should have asked why the time was strong enough for promises, but too weak for truth. Instead, she looked at him with tears she did not let fall and whispered, "I can wait." He looked relieved. Not joyful. Relieved. That should have warned her. Relief was not the same as devotion. But Ava was 24 then, soft-hearted, tired from war, and grateful to be chosen even in secret. So she kept the ring hidden and mistook secrecy for protection. Years passed. Ashford recovered. Rowan grew stronger. The kingdom praised his discipline, his victories, his steady hand. No one praised the woman who kept the hand from shaking when the doors closed. Ava remained close enough to be necessary and distant enough to be deniable. That was her true place. The realization had not come all at once. It had arrived in fragments. A council seat added for her during working sessions, then removed before visiting nobles entered. A royal cloak clasp left in her care, but no mention of her during public thanks. A child from the southern widow houses calling her "our quiet Luna," before his mother hushed him in fear. And Rowan hearing it. Rowan smiling faintly. Rowan saying nothing. Each silence had been a small postponement of pain. Now the postponement was over. Isabella Crane had arrived in silver. Ava saw her from the upper corridor before the formal procession began. Tall, graceful, white American, polished in the way noble families trained daughters to be admired without appearing hungry for admiration. Her silver gown caught the morning light. A royal necklace lay against her throat, blue stones bright as frozen stars. Servants followed her with careful hands. Counselors greeted her with visible relief. Visible. That word again. Isabella looked like the kind of woman a kingdom could understand at first glance. Ava looked like the woman who knew where the spare fever cloth was stored. She stood behind the carved balcony rail, guest list tucked against her chest, and watched Rowan meet Isabella near the north entrance. He did not kiss her hand. He did not need to. He offered his arm. The court saw. Ava saw. Her gloved hand moved to the hidden ring. For the first time, it did not feel like a promise. It felt like evidence. Captain Noah Reed appeared beside her quietly. He had the grave face of a man who noticed too much and had survived by speaking only when necessary. "Miss Bennett," he said. Ava did not look away from the hall below. "Captain, the healer seats are corrected?" "Yes." "The Southern Widows?" "Second row, away from Benton's family." "Good." A pause. Then, softer. "And you?" She turned then. Noah's expression did not pity her. That helped. "What about me?" He looked toward the hall, where Rowan and Isabella stood beneath silver banners. "You are also in this room." Ava's throat tightened. For one breath, she nearly answered honestly. "No, I am beneath it." But the trumpets sounded before she could speak. The kingdom had arrived. Ava straightened the guest list in her hands. Her face became calm. Her voice became useful. "The ceremony is beginning," she said. Noah held her gaze for a moment, then bowed his head. "Yes," he said, "it is." Together, they turned toward the royal hall, where every seat had been arranged correctly, every banner hung with care, every grief protected from insult, every political eye guided safely toward the throne. Ava had prepared the kingdom to witness its future. She had only not prepared herself to be removed from it. The silver dress arrived before the truth did. That was how Ava Bennett understood the shape of the betrayal. Not from Rowan's mouth. Not from a council decree. Not from the sacred announcement that would soon echo through the royal hall before every noble house. Healer, widow, soldier, merchant, and child old enough to recognize a crown. She understood because servants carried Isabella Crane's gown through the corridor with both hands, as if cloth could be holy when it belonged to the right woman. Silver silk, moon thread embroidery, tiny blue stones sewn into the sleeves like frozen stars. The gown moved past Ava in a soft shimmer of certainty. One maid saw her and stopped too quickly. Another looked down. The third whispered, "Careful," though no one had touched the dress. Ava stepped aside. Of course she did. That was what she had been trained by years of private promises to do. Make room. Make things easier. Do not embarrass him. Do not make the kingdom uncomfortable. Do not ask why the future you were promised is being carried past you in another woman's size. The maids hurried on. Ava watched the silver disappear through the open Luna chamber doors. Those doors had not been opened like that for her. Not once. She had entered Rowan's study through side doors, the healer wing through supply doors, the archive through the narrow passage behind the council wall. She had crossed the royal hall before dawn, after midnight, during emergencies, during winter shortages, and during mourning weeks when no one else remembered which families should not be seated together. But the Luna chamber had remained closed. Waiting, she had thought. Now she knew better. It had not been waiting. It had been reserved. A royal jeweler followed soon after the dress, carrying a long velvet case. Ava recognized the seal on it. Ashford Blue Wax. Council approved. He bowed when he saw her. Not deeply. Not as one bows to a future Luna. As one bows to a woman who could solve an administrative problem if he needed one. Miss Bennet. Master Lowell. His eyes flicked toward her gloved hand. Only for a second. Enough. Everyone knew more than they admitted. That was the cruelty of court. Secrets were rarely secret. They were simply inconvenient truths people agreed to make invisible. Is that for Lady Crane? Ava asked. Her voice was calm. She was proud of that. The jeweler hesitated, then answered because lying badly would have been more insulting. Yes, the official necklace. Official. The word entered her like cold water. Ava nodded. The clasp on the left side sticks if you fasten it too quickly. Tell her a maid to press the hinge inward first. The jeweler stared at her, then looked ashamed. Because of course she knew. Ava knew every old clasp, every hidden cabinet, every broken hinge, every drafty window, every grief placed in the wrong section of the hall. She knew the palace the way unloved women knew houses they kept alive. By touch, by memory, by being needed too often to remain ignorant. Thank you, he said quietly. Ava inclined her head and walked away before the kindness in his voice could hurt her. The corridor outside the royal hall had become a river of preparation. Blue carpets unrolled, garlands hung, silver lamps checked, her corrected seating charts copied and distributed. The ceremony she had saved from chaos now moved beautifully toward her own humiliation. That was almost funny. Not enough to laugh. Captain Noah Reed found her near the south arch, where she was adjusting the final healer access mark. You do not have to do that, he said. Ava did not look at him. Yes, I do. No. Someone else can. Someone else will place the fever physician behind the third pillar, and when old Mrs. Tilden faints from the heat, they will take 4 minutes too long to reach her. Noah was quiet. Then he said, You remember Mrs. Tilden? Ava made the mark. Her husband died after the West Ridge ambush. She faints in crowded rooms and refuses to admit it. Noah's jaw tightened. She should not have to attend this. She wants to see whether the kingdom is safe. And is it? Ava finally looked at him. The question sat between them. Beyond them, servants carried silver into the Luna chamber. Below them, nobles entered laughing softly. Somewhere behind closed doors, Rowan stood with Isabella and the council, preparing a future that apparently required Ava's absence, but still benefited from her order. I do not know, she said. It was the most honest thing she had said all morning. Noah's expression changed. Not pity. Respect edged with anger. For her. Not at her. That almost undid her. She turned back to the hall. Please make sure the Southern widows are not blocked during the procession. Ava. Her name in his voice sounded too human. She could not afford human right now. Captain. He understood the correction. It hurt him. He accepted it. Yes, Miss Bennet. He left to do as she asked. Good man. Too late. The ceremony bell rang once. Then again, the kingdom began taking its seats. Ava stood near the lower steps, where she could see everything and be claimed by nothing. Widows in dark veils, healers in blue robes, soldiers with scarred hands, nobles bright with curiosity, merchants whispering behind jeweled fingers, children craning their necks to see the throne. And above them all, the silver Luna chair beside Rowan's black throne. Prepared, polished, waiting no longer. Ava touched the ring beneath her glove. The hidden metal had warmed from her skin. For 3 years, she had imagined this moment differently. Not grandly. She had not needed trumpets or kneeling crowds. Only truth. Rowan taking her hand where others could see. Not ashamed. Not careful. Not later. Now. That had been the dream. A very modest dream when she thought of it. To be acknowledged by the man who had already used every part of her devotion. The north doors opened. The hall rose. Isabella Crane entered in silver. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Court women had been preparing her shape before Ava was allowed to hear the truth. Isabella moved slowly down the aisle, her pale face composed, her beauty clear and easy for the kingdom to understand. The official necklace rested at her throat, blue stones bright under moonstone lamps. Ava saw the clasp. Fastened correctly. Her instruction had been followed. That nearly broke her more than the dress. Even now, her care was helping another woman shine in the place once promised to her. The crowd murmured approval. Softly, reverently. An older woman near the healer row whispered, "She looks like a Luna." Ava heard it. She wished she had not. Then another voice, lower, kinder, from behind her. "But she has not done the work of one." Noah. Ava did not turn. If she turned, her face might betray her. Rowan entered from the eastern arch. The hall changed. Power did that when people had been taught to admire it. He wore black ceremonial armor beneath a royal cloak, the Ashford crown ring on his hand, the wolf crest bright at his throat. Not the clasp Ava usually polished. A new one. Of course. Everything today was new enough to pretend the old did not exist. His eyes moved over the hall. Then over Ava. A pause. Brief. Careful. Not enough to rescue. Then he walked to Isabella. He offered his hand. Isabella placed hers in it. The kingdom saw. Ava felt the hidden ring beneath her glove turn cold. Not physically. Worse. Symbolically. Like a promise realizing it had been foolish to call itself alive. The council elders stepped forward. Elder Warren looked relieved. Lord Benton looked pleased. Several noblewomen smiled behind their hands with the satisfaction of seeing a story become easy. Ava remained at the lower steps. Exactly where she had been placed. Close enough to witness. Far enough not to belong. Rowan led Isabella to the dais, but did not yet seat her. The announcement had not been spoken. There was still a breath before the blade fell. Ava could leave now. The thought came sudden and clean. She could turn. Walk through the south arch, remove herself before they made her watch. But Mrs. Tilden was still in the hall. The healer access needed monitoring. The widows were watching the throne with anxious hope. The treaty envoys were counting every gesture. Duty rose in her like an old master. Then pain rose beside it. Not pushing duty aside. Only standing equal. That was new. Rowan lifted his hand for silence. The hall obeyed. Ava looked at his face. Handsome. Controlled. Unreadable to everyone else. But she knew the small tension near his mouth. The slight rigidity in his right shoulder when he had chosen a path and decided he would not feel the cost until later. Later. The word that had kept her waiting. The word that had buried her slowly. Rowan's voice filled the hall. People of Ashford. Strong. Clear. Royal. The voice she had helped preserve through fever and nightmares. Today, this kingdom steps into its future. Ava's heart did not pound. That surprised her. It only grew very quiet. So quiet she could hear the soft shift of Isabella's silver sleeve. The faint breath of the crowd. The small creak of the Luna chair. Rowan continued. We have survived war, famine, division, and grief. We have stood because Ashford does not break. No, Ava thought. Ashford had bent. Ashford had cracked. Ashford had survived because unnamed hands held pressure against the fracture while kings received applause for standing. But she said nothing. The ring pressed against her skin. Rowan turned slightly toward Isabella. The hall leaned with him. Ava did not move. This kingdom needs a Luna who can stand before every house with grace, strength, and certainty. Every word was selected. Council language. Polished. Deadly. Ava wondered whether he had written it himself. Probably not. If he had, she would have corrected the cruelty out of habit. The thought almost made her smile. Almost. Rowan took Isabella's hand higher, where all could see. Ava saw too. There was no way not to. I name Lady Isabella Crane as the woman chosen for Ashford's future. The hall erupted. Applause rose like weather. Nobles stood. Soldiers struck fists over hearts. The widows clapped more slowly, uncertain but obedient. Healers glanced at Ava. Some looked away. Noah did not clap. Ava noticed that. She noticed everything. It was her curse and her gift. Isabella bowed her head with perfect emotion. Not false, perhaps, but trained. Rowan's gaze moved across the crowd and briefly touched Ava again. For a fraction of a second, she saw it. A question. Will you endure this? Not in words. Not even in guilt. In expectation. He believed she would stand there, quiet and loyal, because she always had. He believed private history could survive public erasure. He believed a hidden ring weighed less than a kingdom's applause. Ava looked back at him calmly. No tears. No plea. No collapse. Only understanding. The applause continued. Inside her glove, the lunar ring no longer felt like a future. It felt like something already returned. Not yet to him, but to herself. The ceremony moved forward around her. Elders stepped up. Isabella received the kingdom's first blessing. A silver veil was lifted. A royal necklace caught the light. Every symbol that had once lived in Ava's quiet hope appeared on another woman under public approval. Ava stood through all of it. Her back straight. Her face composed. Her hands folded. When Mrs. Tilden swayed in the second row, Ava saw it before anyone else. She signaled the healer discreetly. The old woman was reached in seconds. No disruption. No scandal. The future Luna's ceremony remained flawless. Because Ava Bennett, even while being erased from it, had not let another woman's grief fall unattended. That was the last thing she gave the kingdom before she understood she had given enough. The kingdom applauded long enough for Ava Bennett to understand that public betrayal had its own weather. It rose. It filled the hall. It pressed against the skin. It made every quiet woman feel smaller unless she remembered how to stand. Ava stood, below the dais, below the black throne, below the silver Luna chair where Isabella Crane now sat beneath a lifted veil, her pale hands folded gracefully in her lap, the official necklace bright against her throat. The kingdom looked at Isabella and saw the future. Ava looked at Isabella and saw preparation. The correct gown, the correct seat, the correct jewels, the correct woman. Every piece had arrived before the truth, which meant the truth had never been waiting for Ava at all. It had only been withheld from her. Alpha King Rowan Whitlock stood beside Isabella with one hand resting on the arm of the Luna chair. Not touching Isabella. Not exactly. But near enough for every noble house to understand what nearness meant when a king chose where to place his body before witnesses. He had never stood like that beside Ava in public. Not once. Not after the border war when she arranged relief for the southern widows before council noticed famine moving through the villages. Not after she corrected the treaty language that saved Ashford from another winter conflict. Not after she held him through fever, nightmares, and the nights his wolf clawed too close to the surface. Private closeness had been permitted. Public belonging had not. The elders moved through the formal blessing next. Elder Warren lifted the silver bowl. Lord Benton announced the names of the noble houses offering support. The crowd repeated phrases when prompted. Strength to the future. Honor to the crown. Grace to the Luna. Each word struck the hall cleanly. Ava listened. Her face remained calm. Inside her glove, the hidden Luna ring pressed against her finger. She had not placed it there publicly. She had never dared. Rowan had never asked. But on mornings when hope became too heavy to carry loose in a drawer, she had worn it beneath fabric, letting the metal touch her skin where no one could see. A secret promise. A secret foolishness. Now the ring felt different. Not warm. Not sacred. Evidence. When Elder Warren finished the blessing, he turned toward the lower rows. His eyes found Ava. Too quickly. As if this part had been planned too. Ava knew then the ceremony was not finished hurting her. Before the kingdom, Elder Warren said, his voice smooth with public authority, we acknowledge those who have served Ashford loyally during the years of transition. A murmur of approval moved through the hall. Ava's body went still. Noah Reed, standing near the south arch, looked sharply toward the elder. Rowan did not. He knew. Of course he knew. Elder Warren continued. Miss Ava Bennett has given many years of steady assistance to the crown. Assistance. A small word for a large life. Ava did not move. People turned to look at her. Some with curiosity. Some with pity sharpened by relief. some with the pleased discomfort of spectators who had wanted the story resolved without having to admit what the resolution cost. Isabella's face softened. Perhaps she pitied Ava. Perhaps she felt guilty. Perhaps she had been trained well enough to look tender in every public moment. It did not matter. Pity was not protection. Elder Warren smiled. Her loyalty has been appreciated. We trust she will continue supporting Ashford's future with the same grace and discretion she has always shown. Grace and discretion. The hall accepted the words. Because they sounded kind. Because people loved language that made a woman's erasure feel dignified. Ava looked at Rowan. This time, she did not look away. He met her eyes across the hall. There was tension in his jaw. A warning perhaps. Or a plea. Do not make this difficult. Do not force me to answer in front of them. Do not turn private pain into public consequence. Ava heard all of it without him speaking. For 3 years, she had been fluent in Rowan's silences. That had once felt intimate. Now it felt like a language designed to keep her obedient. Elder Warren turned slightly toward Rowan. As His Majesty has often said, Miss Bennet understands the needs of the kingdom better than most. A few people nodded. Ava felt the room prepare itself. The elder was leading somewhere. Everyone knew it. The court loved a clean humiliation when wrapped as honor. Lord Benton spoke next, voice warm and careless. Indeed, Miss Bennet has always known how to serve where she is most needed. Serve. Needed. Not chosen. Not honored. Not loved. No, a step forward half a pace. Ava saw it from the corner of her eye. Not yet, she thought. Not for me. Not in a room that would turn his defense into her weakness. Rowan lifted one hand slightly, and Noah stopped. That small command hurt too. Rowan could control the room. He simply had not used that control to protect her. Elder Warren looked back at the king. Your Majesty, perhaps it would ease the kingdom to hear directly that Miss Bennet remains a trusted part of Ashford after today's transition. There it was. The final cruelty. Not only replacement. Compliance. They wanted her erased, and then displayed as proof that the erasure had been gentle. They wanted the woman with the hidden ring to bless the woman in the silver chair by staying useful. Ava's hand closed once around the guest list she still held. Paper bent under her fingers. Only slightly. Rowan looked at her. Then at the kingdom. Then at Isabella. The hall waited. He could have said her service deserves honor. He could have said no one will speak of Ava, as if she were furniture moved between rooms. He could have said the kingdom owes her more than discretion. He could have said nothing and spared her the next wound. Instead, he chose the easiest sentence. Ava understands her place. Silence fell before the applause returned. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of relief. The kingdom had been handed permission. Permission to move forward without guilt. Permission to admire Isabella without wondering what had been done to Ava. Permission to believe the woman at the lower steps had agreed to be lower. Ava did not breathe for one moment. Only one. Then she did. Slowly. Her place. The phrase entered her body with terrible precision. It explained the side doors. The hidden ring. The private promises. The chair removed before nobles entered. The way Rowan touched her only when witnesses could not turn tenderness into obligation. Her place had never been beside him. Her place had been beneath the future he wanted to keep clean. Isabella lowered her eyes. Ava noticed. Of course she noticed. It was not triumph on Isabella's face. It was discomfort. Good. Let her feel the chair beneath her. Let her understand that silver could be heavy when another woman's silence had been used to polish it. The crowd began clapping again. Softer than before. Still clapping. Ava looked at Rowan through it. His expression had hardened into royal composure. He thought the moment had passed. That was the difference between them. For him, the sentence had solved a political discomfort. For Ava, it had buried the last living part of the promise. Something inside her did not break loudly. It simply went out, like a candle covered by glass. No smoke. No drama. Only absence where flame had been. The ceremony continued. A singer stepped forward. The blessing hymn began. Elders moved to sign the presentation record. Isabella rose from the Luna chair and accepted the kingdom's formal vow of welcome. Ava remained where she stood until the southern widow row shifted. Mrs. Tilden had recovered from her faintness but looked pale again. The hall was too warm. Too crowded. Ava turned to a healer near the arch. Water for the second row. Quickly. Do not make it visible. The healer obeyed immediately. Because Ava's voice still knew how to make things happen. That realization almost made her laugh. Even now, even after her place had been named beneath everyone else's comfort. The kingdom still moved safely because she cared enough not to let pain become negligence. But care, she was beginning to understand, did not require staying. The hymn ended. The applause softened into conversation. People began rising from their seats. Noble women leaned toward one another. Warriors saluted Rowan. Children stared at Isabella's silver dress. Servants carried trays of ceremonial wine toward the side tables. Ava stepped backward. One step. No one stopped her. Another step. No one noticed except Noah. His eyes found hers from across the hall. He knew. Not everything. Enough. Ava gave the faintest shake of her head. Do not follow. His jaw tightened. But he obeyed. Good man. Too late. She moved toward the side corridor, the guest list still in her hand, the hidden Luna ring cold beneath her glove. At the archway, she paused once. Not to look at Rowan. Not really. But her body turned before pride could stop it. He stood on the dais beside Isabella while Elder Warren spoke close to his ear. Rowan listened with the controlled attention of a king managing consequence before it became visible. Then, for reasons Ava would never know, he looked toward the lower steps where she had been. Empty. His gaze shifted. A small frown appeared. Not panic. Not yet. Only irritation that something familiar had moved from where he expected it to remain. Ava watched that frown form. It taught her more than all his promises had. He had not noticed her pain. Only her absence from position. Her place. Yes. Now she understood. She turned away before he could find her in the archway. The corridor outside the hall was cooler. Quieter. A servant carrying wine nearly collided with her. Miss Bennet, forgive me. It is all right. Her voice sounded normal. That surprised both of them. The servant hurried on. Ava walked past the Luna chamber. The door stood open now. Inside, silver curtains stirred in the draught. Flowers covered the dressing table. A royal comb lay beside a tray of pearls. Everything smelled new, expensive, and already claimed. She stopped at the threshold. Only for a second. She had once imagined entering that room, trembling with gratitude. Foolish girl. No, not foolish. Faithful. There was a difference. She let herself honor that version of herself for one breath. Then she continued. At the end of the corridor, beneath a narrow window, she removed her glove. The Luna ring gleamed on her finger. Silver. Black moonstone. Ashford wolves carved along the band. For 3 years, it had been a future. Now it was a question. Not whether Rowan would choose her. He had answered that before the kingdom. The question was whether Ava would continue choosing a place that had just been named for her by a man too cowardly to honor what he had used. She turned the ring once. It resisted over her knuckle. Her finger had grown used to its hidden weight. That hurt. Then it slipped free. Ava held it in her palm and looked at it without tears. Behind her, the kingdom celebrated. Ahead of her, the corridor led toward Rowan's private study, the healer wing, the archive, her small chamber, and eventually the gate most nobles forgot existed. For the first time all day, she did not think of what needed to be fixed next. She thought of dawn. Quiet. Gray. Empty road. A place not beneath someone else's promise. She closed her fingers around the ring and walked toward her room. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Steadily. The ceremony was still happening behind her. But Ava Bennet had already left it. The last night of order began with Ava Bennet doing exactly what the kingdom still needed. That was the cruelest part. She did not leave the royal hall and run to her room like a broken woman fleeing witnesses. She did not tear the silver banners from the corridor. She did not throw the lunar ring into a fountain or let any servant see her hands shake. Instead, she went to the healer wing. Because Mrs. Tilden had nearly fainted. Because the southern widows had been seated under too much heat. Because one of the old physicians had whispered that the winter cough tinctures were running low, and if the ceremony feast continued into evening, 3 children from the lower villages would be waiting in the clinic without medicine. Pain could wait. That was what Ava had taught herself for years. Pain had always waited. The healer wing smelled of boiled herbs, damp wool, and quiet urgency. It did not care who had been chosen as Luna. Fever did not pause for public humiliation. Wounds did not close because a king needed a beautiful future. Ava took off her gloves before touching the supply ledger. The ring was gone from her finger now. Its absence felt larger than the metal had ever been. She had placed it in her pocket after leaving the corridor window. It rested there, cold and heavy, against the folded guest list she no longer needed. Sister Margaret, the senior healer, looked up from a cabinet. Miss Bennet, you should be in the hall. Ava turned a page. No, the healer stopped. Only one word. No explanation. No softness placed over it. Ava marked the tincture shortage in red and pulled a blank order sheet from the drawer. Winter cough medicine needs to be released before morning, not after council review. If Elder Warren complains, tell him the order was entered before ceremony closure. Sister Margaret stared at her. By whom? Ava dipped the pen. By me. You do not have authority to bypass council. Ava looked at her then. Calmly. I have been doing it for 3 years. Today they only remembered to make that inconvenient. The older woman's face changed. Not shock. Recognition. The kind people only allowed themselves once silence had become too shameful to continue. Ava signed the routing note, not with Rowan's seal, but with her own name. Ava Bennet. Clear. Legible. Unhidden. Then she slid the paper across the table. Deliver this before dawn. Sister Margaret took it carefully. As you wish. No title. Still, the respect in it reached a place Ava had not known was still listening. After the healer wing, Ava went to the archive. The treaty correction waited on the central desk, untouched. Of course it did. The Northern envoy had objected to the banner order before the ceremony, and Ava had known the wording of the public acknowledgement would matter. If the reply went out as drafted, it would sound dismissive. If it sounded dismissive, Rowan would lose 3 weeks calming a pride he had never bothered to study because Ava had always studied it for him. She sat. For 20 minutes, she corrected the letter. Not gently this time. Precisely. She removed unnecessary flattery, added one line of formal respect, shifted blame away from insult and towards ceremonial confusion. It would hold. It would not sparkle. It would not charm. It would hold. That was enough. When she finished, she placed the corrected version on top of the original and wrote in the margin, "Send before noon, if the kingdom still prefers peace to pride." She almost crossed out the last phrase, then did not. Let them read one honest margin after years of polished ones. The palace outside grew louder as the celebration moved into the feast hall. Music, crystal, soft laughter. Nobles enjoying the relief of a future made simple. Ava passed the open doors once. Only once. Rowan stood near the center of the room with Isabella beside him. She had changed from the silver veil into a softer gown, but the royal necklace remained at her throat. People surrounded them in warm rings of admiration. Rowan listened to Elder Warren with his usual cold composure. Then his eyes moved toward the doorway, toward Ava. He saw her. Something tightened in his expression. Not regret. Not yet. Awareness that she was not where he had placed her. He said something to Warren and began to step away. Ava turned before he could reach the door. She did not want a hallway conversation. Not now. Not where he could lower his voice and make betrayal sound private again. She walked faster than before. Not running. Never running. But the decision inside her had begun to move with its own pulse. Her room waited at the end of the eastern corridor. Small. Orderly. Too familiar. A narrow bed. A desk. A wardrobe. A window facing the Healer Gate Road. No silver curtains. No jewels. No flowers. Nothing that would tell a stranger she had once been promised a throne. Ava closed the door, locked it, then stood very still. Only there, alone, did her breath break. Not into sobs. Not even tears. Just one sharp inhale, as if her body had finally realized it had survived the hall. She pressed one hand against the desk until the feeling passed. Then she began. First, the Luna ring. She took it from her pocket and placed it in the center of the desk. No velvet box. No wrapping. No protection. A promise that had been given without witnesses could be returned without ceremony. Beside it, she placed the royal key Rowan had given her after the war. It opened the archive, the healer wing, the old council records, and his private study. Never the Luna chamber. She almost laughed at that. The sound did not come. Next, the cloak clasp. Not the new one he had worn today. The old silver wolf clasp he used on winter inspection rides. The one she had kept repaired because its hinge stuck in cold weather. He had once told her he trusted her with it because she knew what mattered before it broke. She placed it beside the key. Then the ledger. The leather cover was worn at the corners from her hands. Inside were lists no one had ever asked to see properly. Widows who needed grain before pride allowed them to request it. Healers who underreported shortages. Treaty houses that required softened language. Children with winter cough. Old soldiers who refused pain drafts but accepted apple bread. Rowan's right-hand pain schedule. Nightmare triggers. The precise days his wolf became volatile after too much ceremony. A kingdom inside a book. Ava opened it to the first blank page and wrote one heading. Inventory of duties performed without title. She stared at the words, then began listing. Not everything. No page could hold everything. But enough. Enough for the room to accuse him if he ever entered it with the arrogance to wonder why the palace felt different without her. She did not write a farewell. She did not write, "You hurt me." She did not write, "I loved you." Both were too obvious to deserve ink. Instead, she wrote, Healer routes corrected before ceremony closure. Widow seating protected. Northern envoy reply amended. Winter cough release authorized. Archive key returned. Study key returned. Private promise returned. Her hand paused on the final line. Then she added, position vacated. The words were cold. Good. Cold things preserved evidence. A knock came at the door. Ava did not move. Ava. Rowan. Not your majesty. Not Alpha King. Rowan. Behind her door, using the name he had spoken privately for years whenever he needed something softer than power. Her heart reacted before her judgment could stop it. That angered her more than anything else. Ava, he repeated. Open the door. Not please. Not may I speak. Open. Even now. She walked to the door, but did not unlock it. What do you need, your majesty? Silence. The title did what she intended. Separated. Corrected. Behind the door, Rowan's voice lowered. You left the hall. Yes. The council noticed. Of course that was first. Not are you hurt. Not I should not have said it that way. The council noticed. Ava closed her eyes. I am sure they survived. A pause. Then, sharper. This is not the night to become difficult. There it was. The final gift. No mask. No softness. No private, almost tenderness to confuse her. Ava opened her eyes. Then you should be relieved, she said. By morning, I will no longer be here to trouble the night. Another silence. Different this time. Ava. Now he heard it. Not all of it. Enough to step closer. The door did not move, but she felt the weight of him on the other side. What does that mean? She looked back at the desk. The ring. The key. The clasp. The ledger. It means the kingdom has its Luna now. That is not what I asked. No, Ava said quietly. It is what you answered before everyone. His breath changed. Ava, open the door. No, the word was very soft. Stronger than shouting. He did not speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice had lowered into the tone that had once undone her. We should speak. We should have spoken before the silver dress arrived. Silence again. This one entered him. She knew because he did not immediately reply. Outside the window, dusk deepened into night. Inside, Ava stood barefoot in the room where she had waited 3 years for a future that had been handed to another woman while the kingdom applauded. Rowan finally said, I did what the kingdom needed. Ava touched the door with 2 fingers. Not tenderly. To feel the wood between them. No. You did what made the kingdom comfortable. A breath. Then his hand touched the door from the other side. She could hear it. The old Ava would have opened. The old Ava would have let him explain until pain became something she carried quietly for him again. This Ava stepped back. I have work to finish. Ava, good night, your majesty. She walked away from the door. He remained there. For a long time. Long enough that the hallway guards surely noticed. Long enough that court gossip would already be forming. Long enough for him to wonder whether power could open a door that respect had failed to earn. He did not order it opened. That was something. Not enough. Eventually, his footsteps retreated. Ava stood in the center of the room until the sound faded. Then she packed. A gray cloak. 2 plain dresses. A small purse. A comb. The healer knife she used for cutting bandages. No jewelry. No keepsake from Rowan. No letters. She folded each item carefully. A woman can leave in ruins without becoming ruinous. That was what she wanted the room to say. Near midnight, she finished the final inventory note and placed it beneath the ledger's cover. Then she unlocked her window, not to escape through it, only to let cold air enter. The room had held too many years of waiting. It deserved fresh air before becoming empty. Ava sat on the edge of the bed and removed the last glove from her left hand. The finger where the ring had hidden looked pale, marked faintly where silver had pressed. She rubbed the skin once. No wound. No blood. Only a circle fading. That made her ache more than anything. Some injuries left no visible proof unless the injured woman arranged a desk carefully enough. At 2, the palace quieted. At 3, the feast ended. At 4, Ava rose. She put on the gray cloak, lifted her satchel, and looked once at the room. No tears. No letter. No final glance toward the hall where Rowan had chosen Isabella. Only the desk, the inventory, the return promise. Then Ava Bennett opened her door and stepped into the corridor. The palace was sleeping under silver banners. By morning, it would wake to a future polished for another woman, and to an absence so orderly it could not be called an accident. By morning, Ava Bennett was gone through the gate no one important remembered. That was how the kingdom lost her. Not through the grand silver doors. Not down the royal steps where crowds had applauded Isabella Crane beneath the Luna veil. Not past the black throne where Alpha King Rowan Whitlock had stood and named another woman as Ashford's future while Ava remained below him, calm enough for everyone to mistake her silence for consent. She left through the healer gate, the narrow eastern gate, the one used for medicine wagons, injured patrols, fever carts, and servants carrying things too urgent or too unpleasant for noble entrances. Of course, that was where Ava's last footsteps belonged. It was the door she had used most often. The palace was still sleeping when she crossed the eastern corridor with her gray cloak drawn close and her small satchel resting against her side. Dawn had not yet touched the windows. The torches burned low. The silver banners from yesterday's ceremony hung motionless in the dark, beautiful and useless. Ava walked beneath them without looking up. She knew the palace by sound. The soft groan in the old stair near the healer wing. The draft before the archive corner. The sleeping breath of guards who had stood too many shifts during celebration night. The distant drip of rainwater from the cracked roof above the West Hall. For 3 years, those sounds had meant responsibility. Today, they meant goodbye. She passed Rowan's private study. The door was closed. No light beneath it. For once, he had slept. Or tried to. Ava stopped only because her body did before her mind could forbid it. Behind that door were the papers she had corrected, the treaty reply waiting in the right stack, the Winterkoff order copied for council review, the polished desk where he had once leaned over her shoulder and said, "No one understands this kingdom the way you do." She had believed the sentence meant she belonged. Now she understood it meant he knew exactly how much he used her. Her hand tightened around the satchel strap. No more translation of almost love into hope. No more private sentences held against public shame. No more waiting for a man brave enough in war, but cowardly in gratitude. She moved on. At the archive door, she placed the spare copy of the Northern Treaty correction beneath the threshold. Habit, perhaps. Or mercy. She stood staring at it for one breath. Then whispered, "Last one." The words disappeared into the stone. At the healer wing, Sister Margaret was awake. Ava had expected that. The old healer stood beside the supply cabinet in a dark shawl, holding the release order Ava had signed hours earlier. Her face was pale, not from fear, but from knowing too late. "Miss Bennett," she said softly. Ava stopped. "Sister." The healer's eyes moved to the satchel. "You are leaving." "Yes." No explanation. No apology. The healer looked down at the order in her hands. "The winter cough tinctures are already being loaded." "Good. Mrs. Tilden will recover." "Good." The Southern widows were given water after the ceremony. "I know." A silence. Then Sister Margaret said, "You should have been seated higher." Ava looked at her. The sentence was small. Late. Still, it was not nothing. She was learning not to spend her last warmth making other people feel better about the cold they had allowed. Instead, she nodded once. "Take care of the healer routes. The North Cabinet inventory is wrong. Fever cloth is counted twice because the clerks used 2 names for the same role." Sister Margaret almost smiled through the sadness. "Still correcting us at the door." "No," Ava said quietly. "Only telling you where to look." The healer bowed her head. Not to Aluna. Not to a royal promise. To Ava. That mattered. Ava continued toward the eastern stairs. The closer she came to the healer gate, the colder the air became. Stone gave way to packed earth. Royal silence gave way to stable smells, damp straw, iron, and morning mist. At the gate, Captain Noah Reed waited. Not standing guard by duty. Waiting by choice. Ava slowed. "Noah." He held his helmet under one arm. His face looked as if he had not slept. Anger lived beneath his calm, but it was not the kind that asked to be used. It stayed behind his eyes, controlled, respectful. "I thought you might come this way," he said. "Did Rowan send you?" "No." The answer came immediately. That helped. Ava looked past him to the iron gate. "Will you stop me?" "No." His voice roughened around the word. "I should have stopped more before this." Ava looked at him fully. The old instinct rose again. To forgive quickly. To ease guilt. To tell a good man that his silence had not harmed her because he had not held the blade. But silence could still hold the door open for harm. "You should have spoken," she said. Noah lowered his gaze. "Yes." "Before the hall." "Yes." "Before he said I understood my place." His jaw tightened. "Yes." The admission did not repair. It respected. That was enough for the gate. Ava stepped closer. "I am not angry that you failed to save me." He looked up. "I am angry that so many people knew I needed saving from a room they called honorable." The words landed between them. Noah accepted them without defense. Good. She had no strength left for defensive men. He turned and unlocked the healer gate. The iron bolt dragged softly. Too loud in the quiet. Not loud enough to wake a kingdom that had slept through her pain for years. The gate opened onto the eastern road. Mist lay low over the fields. The sky beyond the hills was gray, not yet gold. A narrow track led away from Ashford toward healer villages, border markets, and eventually places where no one cared which woman Rowan had chosen in silver. Ava did not step through yet. Noah looked at her. "Where will you go?" She looked at the road. For the first time, she had no prepared answer. No plan folded in 3 copies. No route approved by council. No guest list corrected. No widow section protected. Only distance. And distance, for now, was enough. "Somewhere my place is not beneath someone else's promise," she said. Noah's face changed. Pain. Respect. Helplessness accepted as consequence. "If he comes after you?" Ava looked back toward the palace. The black towers rose behind her, silver banners hidden now by stone and shadow. Somewhere inside, Rowan's study waited with corrected papers. Her room waited with the ring, keys, cloak clasp, and ledger arranged like testimony. Isabella's Luna chamber waited with flowers opening in water. The kingdom had everything it thought it wanted. Let it wake with what it had lost. "If he comes," Ava said, "tell him I believed him." Noah frowned. "Believed him?" "When he said I understood my place." Her voice stayed calm. "Tell him I finally did." Noah closed his eyes once, as if the words hurt him physically. Then he stepped aside. Ava walked through the healer gate. One step, then another. The earth outside the palace was wet from night rain. The hem of her gray cloak brushed the grass. Her satchel was light. Too light for a woman leaving behind 3 years of promise and half a kingdom's hidden memory. Behind her, Noah did not call her back. That was his last kindness. The gate closed. Softly, Ava kept walking. At first, every sound made her body expect summons. A guard shouting her name. Rowan's command from the courtyard. A council servant running after her with a crisis she alone knew how to fix. Nothing came. Only birds beginning in the hedges. Only wheels turning somewhere far off. Only her own breathing. The silence felt too large. For years, she had belonged to interruptions. "Ava, the envoy is angry." "Ava, the healer wing needs signatures." "Ava, His Majesty has not eaten." "Ava, the widows are waiting." "Ava, the council needs you." "Ava, Ava, Ava." Always her name attached to need, never to honor. She stopped at the first bend in the road and looked down at her left hand. No glove now. No ring. A pale mark remained where the band had pressed beneath fabric. A faint circle, already fading. She touched it once. The skin was tender, not wounded. That seemed unfair. Some betrayals should leave visible evidence. But perhaps the room she left behind would serve that purpose. The ring on the desk. The keys lined up. The ledger opened to inventory of duties performed without title. Position vacated. Let Rowan read that. Let him stand where she had slept and understand that her leaving was not confusion, not jealousy, not a woman's emotional protest after a public ceremony. It was resignation. From a role he had never had the courage to name. The road curved through pine. Morning slowly brightened. Behind her, Ashford Palace remained silent. For now, Ava imagined the first hour after waking. A servant would go to her room for the updated reception notes. No answer. Sister Margaret would send the winter cough route and mention Ava had left. Noah would report the healer gate. Someone would open her door. Perhaps not Rowan at first. Perhaps a maid. Perhaps Noah. Perhaps Rowan would be annoyed before he was afraid. The thought did not surprise her. He would notice absence first as inconvenience. That was how men like Rowan learned loss. Through systems failing where love had once softened the blow. Ava walked until the palace disappeared behind the trees. Only then did she stop. The sun broke over the eastern ridge, pale and cold. She turned her face toward it. No dramatic freedom filled her. No sudden joy. No clean forgetting. Her chest hurt. Her feet hurt. Her heart felt like a room after the furniture had been removed. Larger, echoing, not yet livable. But it was hers. That was enough for mourning. A wagon approached from the road ahead, pulled by 2 brown horses and driven by an older woman in a dark cloak. The wagon bed carried crates marked with healer symbols. The woman slowed. Roads wet for walking alone. Ava looked up. I know. Heading east. Yes. How far? Ava considered. She could lie. She could say a village name. A border town. A healer station. But for once, she did not want to invent certainty to comfort a stranger. I do not know yet. The woman studied her face. Soft white skin pale from sleeplessness. Round cheeks cold from dawn air. Eyes calm in the dangerous way of a woman who had already heard the worst and survived the first hour after it. The woman nodded. Then ride until you do. Ava almost refused. Pride rose. Then wisdom, quieter, answered. Leaving did not mean rejecting every offered kindness. It meant choosing which ones did not become chains. Thank you, Ava said. The woman reached down a hand. Ava took it and climbed onto the wagon bench. The crates smelled of herbs and clean wool. Healer supplies. Of course. Ava sat beside them, cloak folded around her, looking toward the east as the wagon began moving. The older woman flicked the reins. Name. Ava paused. Not because she feared giving it. Because she was hearing it without Ashford attached. Ava Bennett. Mary Collins. I run supplies to Bellwether. Bellwether. A border healer village. Small enough not to appear on most council maps unless someone had bothered to mark winter illness routes. Ava had marked it once. In red. Bellwether has lung fever risk after frost, she said automatically. Mary looked at her. You know Bellwether? I know records. The woman smiled faintly. Records save lives when people believe them. Ava looked down at her hands. Empty of ring. Still full of memory. Yes, she said. They do. The wagon rolled on. By the time the sun cleared the trees, Ashford was completely gone from view. Ava did not look back. She thought she might cry then. She did not. Perhaps tears would come later, in a rented room, over a cup of tea made by someone who did not know she had once been almost Luna. Perhaps they would come when she saw silver and remembered the chair. Perhaps they would come when the silence stopped feeling like a held breath and became loneliness. But not yet. For now, she sat beside medicine crates on an eastern road, moving away from a palace that had defined her place beneath another woman's promise. For now, the air smelled of pine, rain, and herbs. For now, no one needed her to make betrayal graceful. Behind her, the kingdom would wake. The ceremony would continue into its second day. Isabella would be congratulated. Rowan would reach for order and find the woman who made it gone. By morning, he would learn that Ava Bennett had not misunderstood her place. She had finally refused it. The kingdom noticed Ava Bennett was gone before Rowan Whitlock allowed himself to call it loss. At first, he called it delay, then inconvenience, then poor timing. All small words, all useless. The morning after the ceremony, Ashford Palace woke under silver banners and expected the second day of celebration to move like the first, polished, controlled, beautiful enough to hide the bruises beneath it. Instead, the hall opened wrong. The healer section had no updated list. The Southern widows arrived early and were led to the wrong benches, beside the very families Ava had carefully kept away from them. Mrs. Tilden grew pale before the first hymn, and Sister Margaret had to leave the healer wing herself because no one knew where Ava had marked the emergency access note. The Northern envoy found the original treaty reply on Rowan's desk, not Ava's corrected version. The clerk, panicked by the unfamiliar margin note, had sent the wrong one. By noon, the envoy's party had packed half their trunks. By afternoon, winter cough tinctures were delayed because the release order Ava signed had been questioned by a council assistant who did not know whether her authority still mattered after Isabella's presentation. By evening, the palace had begun whispering her name in every corridor. Ava? Where is Ava? Did Miss Bennet review this? Has Miss Bennet seen the healer route? Should this go to Miss Bennet first? Every question moved through the palace like a bell no one wanted to hear. Rowan heard it anyway. He sat in his private study with the wrong treaty reply in his hand, reading the sentence that had insulted the Northern House by omission. It was not a large mistake. That made it worse. Large mistakes could be blamed on crisis. Small ones revealed dependence. Ava would have caught this, he thought, then hated the thought for arriving so easily. Across from him, Elder Warren stood stiffly with Lord Benton beside him. Isabella Crane sat near the window, silver replaced by a pale blue morning gown. The official necklace remained at her throat, but it looked heavier in daylight. Everything did. The envoy can be soothed, Warren said. Rowan looked up. How? The elder hesitated. We can send a formal clarification. With what wording? Warren opened his mouth, closed it. Rowan let the silence sit. Ava would have known. Not because she was magical. Not because she was born for treaties. Because she had spent years paying attention while the men who called themselves necessary mistook her attention for softness. Rowan set the letter down. Where is Ava? No one answered quickly enough. Isabella's gaze lowered. Rowan's eyes moved to her. Do you know? No, her voice was quiet. I have not seen her since the hall. The hall. Ava standing below the dais. Hands folded. Face calm. The ring he had given her hidden somewhere he had not dared to name before witnesses. His own voice returning to him now with a precision that made sleep impossible even in memory. Ava understands her place. He had said it to settle the room. To keep the ceremony from becoming difficult. To assure the kingdom that the woman he had kept beside him in secret would not disturb the woman he had chosen in public. He had thought it was political language. Now it sounded like a door closing. Captain Noah Reed entered without waiting for full permission. That alone told Rowan something had changed. Noah bowed, but not low enough to hide his face. Your Majesty. Rowan stood. What is it? Noah held out a folded report. She left before dawn. The study went silent. Not court silence. Not ceremonial. Something older. Something that recognized consequence before pride could rename it. Rowan did not take the report at first. Who told you? I saw her leave. The word struck like a physical thing. Rowan stepped around the desk. You saw her leave? Yes. And you did not stop her? Noah's eyes lifted. No, the answer carried no apology. Rowan's wolf rose hard beneath his skin. Every instinct in him demanded movement. Command. Retrieval. Riders. Gates. Roads. Names. Power looking for a shape to fill because regret was too difficult to hold. You opened the gate, Rowan said. Yes. Why? Noah's jaw tightened. Because she asked no one for permission. The room changed. Warren inhaled sharply. Benton muttered something under his breath. Rowan did not look away from Noah. What did she say? Noah's voice remained steady. She said the kingdom has its Luna now. Isabella flinched. Rowan's hand closed once. And she said if you came after her, I should tell you she believed you. The words entered him slowly. Not because they were unclear. Because they were unbearable. She believed me, Rowan repeated. Noah nodded. When you said she understood her place. The room had no air after that. Isabella's hand moved to the necklace at her throat. Elder Warren looked down. Lord Benton suddenly found the window very interesting. Rowan stood in the center of his study and understood, with a coldness that no battlefield had ever given him, that Ava had not left confused. She had left because he had finally explained her life to her. Her place. Below the dais. Behind the work. Inside private promises. Outside public honor. He moved toward the door. Noah stepped sideways. Not blocking him fully. Enough. Rowan stopped. Move. No, the word should have been impossible in this room. It was not. Perhaps Ava's absence had already begun changing the laws of courage. Rowan's voice lowered. You are refusing your king? I am refusing to help a man turn regret into pursuit before he has understood what he is chasing. Warren snapped. Captain Reed. Rowan lifted one hand. The elder went silent. Noah continued, quieter. If you send riders now, she will become a runaway to be recovered. She did not run. She resigned. Resigned. The word landed differently from gone. Gone could be temporary. Resigned had structure. Witness. Reason. Ava had always loved structure. Even pain, apparently, had been arranged by her hand. Rowan turned slowly toward her room. He did not remember walking there. Only arriving. The eastern corridor was quiet. though too many servants had gathered at careful distances pretending not to watch. Her door was closed, not locked. He opened it himself. The room inside was clean, cruelly clean. A narrow bed made with military precision. A window cracked open to morning air. A wardrobe missing only what a woman could carry without burden. No torn fabric. No spilled ink. No broken mirror. Nothing to allow the court to say she had been hysterical. The desk held everything. The lunar ring lay in the center. Not in a box. Not wrapped. Bare silver against dark wood. Beside it sat the royal key, the archive key, the healer wing key, and the old wolf head cloak clasp with the repaired hinge. The ledger lay open. Inventory of duties performed without title. Rowan did not breathe for several seconds. Isabella reached the doorway behind him and stopped. Noah remained in the hall. Elder Warren had followed too, though his face had gone gray. Rowan stepped to the desk. The first lines were neat. Healer routes corrected before ceremony closure. Widow seating protected. Northern envoy reply amended. Winter cough release authorized. Archive key returned. Study key returned. Private promise returned. Position vacated. Private promise returned. The words did not shout. They did not need to. They had the force of law. Rowan touched the edge of the page, but not the ring. He had given it to her 3 years ago in the West Corridor. He remembered the softness of her hand when he closed her fingers over it. The relief he felt when she said she could wait. Relief. Not joy. Not courage. Relief that she would carry the future privately, so he did not have to defend it publicly. He had called that love because it benefited him to misunderstand. Isabella moved into the room slowly. "Is that the ring?" she asked. Her voice was barely audible. Rowan did not answer. The answer was too large. She looked at the ledger, then at the keys, then at the narrow bed where Ava had slept within walking distance of power and still been kept outside every room that mattered by name. "I did not know," Isabella said. Noah's voice came from the doorway. "You knew enough." The sentence cut cleanly. Isabella closed her eyes. She did not defend herself. Good. Perhaps Silver could learn weight after all. Rowan turned the ledger page. Names. So many names. Mrs. Tilden, crowd heat, seat near side access. Southern widows, separate from Benton family. Captain Morris, knee injury, no third row stairs. Bellwether, lung fever risk after frost. Northern envoy, never use ceremonial misunderstanding, without formal respect clause. Rowan's right shoulder stiffness after long ceremonies. Rowan's wolf agitation after public vows. Rowan's sleep after war anniversaries. His own body, recorded with more care than he had given her heart. He closed the ledger, not because he had finished, because he could not continue with witnesses. Warren cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we should retrieve Miss Bennet before rumors." Rowan looked at him. The elder stopped. "Before rumors what?" Warren swallowed. "Before the kingdom believes there was disorder." Rowan's laugh was quiet. "Terrible. There was disorder. She was the one hiding it from us." No one answered. Rowan looked back at the desk. The room had become accusation, but not messy accusation. Ava's kind. Precise. Impossible to dismiss. He picked up the old cloak clasp. The hinge moved smoothly. She had repaired it after the northern inspection ride last winter. He had not noticed until now. Of course. He noticed only when things failed. That was the truth of him. The thought sickened him. A commotion rose faintly from the hall. A servant arrived, breathless. "Your Majesty, the northern envoy requests immediate audience or departure." Rowan closed his fist around the clasp. Ava had left the correction. They had ignored it. Even after she left, her final work had tried to save them from their own carelessness. He turned to Noah. "Bring the treaty reply from the archive desk. The corrected one. Send it with formal apology and full witness." Noah nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. Release winter cough supplies under Ava's order. Do not question her signature again." Sister Margaret, visible at the hallway edge, bowed her head. "Yes, Your Majesty. Move the southern widows before the second ceremony begins." A pause. Then Rowan said, "Cancel the second ceremony." Elder Warren went rigid. "Your Majesty." Rowan faced him fully. "There will be no celebration while this kingdom is functioning on a woman's abandoned instructions." Isabella looked at him. Something like grief passed through her face. Then she reached for the royal necklace at her throat. Her hands shook as she unfastened it. The clasp resisted. Of course it did. Ava had known that too. Isabella pulled too hard. The hinge caught. She stopped, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Press inward first." Rowan stared at her. Isabella opened her eyes. She told the jeweler, "I heard one of the maids say it." Then she pressed the hinge correctly. The necklace opened. She placed it on Ava's desk beside the ring, not claiming space, returning weight. "I will not sit in that chair again today," she said. Warren looked outraged. "Lady Crane, no," Isabella said. Her voice shook, but held. "If the chair requires her silence to look beautiful, it is not mine to sit in." Rowan looked at the necklace, then at the ring. The two pieces of silver lay near each other like different versions of the same failure. Outside, the palace bells began ringing for the second ceremony. No one moved. Rowan walked to the window. From there, he could see the eastern road beyond the Healer Gate, a thin line disappearing into morning mist. Ava had gone that way. Gray cloak, small satchel, no ring, no farewell letter, no permission requested. His first impulse still lived in him. Ride. Find her. Explain. Tell her he had not meant it the way it sounded. But Noah's words held. She resigned, and the ledger beneath his hand proved why. Rowan had no right to chase the woman he had never publicly stood beside, not before learning to stand in the damage she left. So he did not call for horses. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Instead, he turned back to the room. Elder Warren. The elder stiffened. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Gather the council." "For what purpose?" Rowan looked at Ava's desk. "At last," he said, "we will learn what Miss Bennet was doing while we were busy deciding where she belonged." The elder lowered his gaze. Noah stepped aside. Sister Margaret went to release the medicine. Isabella remained by the desk, one hand resting near the necklace she had removed, face pale and changed. Rowan took the ledger. Not the ring, not the necklace. The ledger. The only thing he deserved to touch. He carried it to council. For the first time in years, Ava Bennet would enter that room by name. Not as a woman behind him. Not as the hidden promise beneath his glove. Not as someone who understood her place. As the record of everything the kingdom had mistaken for nothing because she did it quietly. And far east, beyond the Healer Road, Ava was riding beside medicine crates toward a place Rowan did not yet know. The kingdom had its Luna. The kingdom had its ceremony. The kingdom had its polished future. But by morning, the woman beneath the promise was gone. And only then did Ashford begin to understand that some departures are not absences. They are verdicts. The first day without Ava Bennet did not ruin Ashford. It only revealed it. That was worse. Ruin could be blamed on tragedy, on enemies, on weather, on war, on anything large enough to make people feel innocent beneath it. Revelation had no such mercy. It simply pulled back the curtain and showed everyone the weak beams they had been decorating with silver. By noon, the royal hall had been emptied of celebration chairs and filled with people holding problems. The second ceremony had been canceled. No official reason was given at first, because no one could agree on language that did not make the truth sound dangerous. Elder Warren wanted to call it a procedural pause. Lord Benton suggested ceremonial adjustment. The steward whispered transition delay. Rowan Whitlock listened to all three and then opened Ava's ledger on the council table. "No," he said. The room went silent. Across from him, Isabella Crane sat without the official necklace. Her throat looked bare, almost fragile, after the weight of blue stones. She had changed out of the silver gown into a dark gray dress borrowed from a maid because she said she could not think while wearing another woman's silence. No one knew how to answer that, so they did not. Captain Noah Reed stood near the door, arms folded, expression controlled. Sister Margaret had already sent the winter cough tinctures east under Ava's order. The northern envoy had received Ava's corrected letter and, after reading it twice, postponed departure. The kingdom was being saved by a woman who was no longer in it. That fact sat in the council chamber like an accusation with perfect posture. Rowan turned the first page of the ledger. "Mrs. Tilden," he read. Elder Warren shifted. "Your Majesty, perhaps this is not the proper." Rowan looked up. The elder stopped. Rowan continued. "Mrs. Tilden, husband dead after West Ridge ambush. Faints in crowded rooms. Seat near side access. Do not place beneath heated lamps." He looked toward the steward. "Who arranged her seat yesterday?" The steward swallowed. "Miss Bennet corrected it." "And who nearly placed her elsewhere this morning?" No one answered. Rowan turned the page. "Southern widows. Do not seat near Bennet family. Grievance unresolved after supply abandonment. Lord Benton went pale with offense. Your Majesty, that matter was settled. No, Noah said from the wall. It was buried. Rowan did not correct him. That, more than anything, shifted the room. Once, men like Noah had waited for permission to speak truth. Ava's absence had made permission look smaller. Rowan read name after name. Not quickly. He forced the council to sit inside each one. Captain Morris and the stairs is injured, knee could not manage. Bellwether and the lung fever risk after frost. The Northern Envoy and the exact phrase never to use without formal respect. Healer cabinet inventory counted twice under 2 names. Widow relief funds delayed because Lord Benton preferred quarterly review to immediate need. At that, Benton protested. This is private administrative commentary. Rowan's voice stayed cold. No, this is governance we allowed to become private because it was easier to let Ava carry what embarrassed us. Ava, her name entered the council chamber without title, then seemed to demand one. Not Luna, not promised woman, not assistant, something more honest. The room did not yet know what. Isabella looked down at her hands. I benefited from that, she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She did not lift her chin defensively. I was welcomed because the room was already ordered. I stood in a hall where widows were seated safely. Healers had access. Envoys were protected from insult, and no one asked who made it possible. Then I sat in the chair prepared by the same silence that erased her. Elder Warren's mouth tightened. Lady Crane, this kind of public guilt does not help the kingdom. Isabella looked at him. Private comfort did not help it either. Noah's gaze flicked toward her. Not forgiveness. Not approval exactly. But acknowledgement. That was all the morning allowed. Rowan closed the ledger halfway, then opened it again. He did not trust himself to stop. If he stopped too soon, grief might turn into wanting. Wanting might turn into pursuit. Pursuit would be easier than reform. And Ava had not left him easy work. She had left him the truth. Every item in this ledger becomes central record by nightfall, Rowan said. Elder Warren stiffened. Some of these are personal observations. She observed because the appointed offices failed. The council will need to review. The council is being reviewed. No one spoke. Rowan looked around the table. For the first time in years, he saw them the way Ava must have seen them. Proud men with polished seals. Careful women trained to soften intelligence until it did not threaten inheritance. Elders who mistook delay for wisdom. Nobles who called compassion disorder unless it wore ceremony clothes. And himself, worst of all, a king who accepted invisible devotion because naming it would require him to share power with the woman who gave it. His gaze lowered to the ledger again. Position vacated. The words waited on the page like a clean cut. A servant entered near the side door and bowed. Your Majesty, citizens are gathered outside the lower hall. Rowan looked up. For what? The servant hesitated. They are asking why Miss Bennet has not appeared. The room changed again. That question had weight. Not from nobles. Not from council. Citizens. Widows. Healers. Border families. People who knew Ava by the shape of problems solved before they became public. Isabella closed her eyes briefly. Noah said, they noticed before the court admitted it. Rowan stood. Elder Warren rose quickly. Your Majesty, it would be unwise to address them without prepared language. Rowan looked at him. Prepared by whom? The elder had no answer. Ava would have written it. Ava would have known how to tell the people enough truth to prevent panic and enough dignity to prevent gossip from becoming cruelty. Ava would have softened his failure for the kingdom. Again. No, not this time. Rowan walked to the lower hall without prepared language. The corridor outside was crowded with servants who pretended to work and failed to hide their listening. News moved faster than proclamations. By the time he reached the lower balcony overlooking the entrance court, a crowd had gathered below. Not enormous, but enough. Southern widows in dark shawls. Healers in blue aprons. 2 veterans leaning on canes. Several servants. A few merchants. A boy Rowan recognized only because Ava's ledger had named him. Mrs. Tilden's grandson, the one who needed steam treatment during winter cough. They looked up when Rowan stepped into view. The silence was not reverent. It was expectant. That was harder. Rowan gripped the stone rail. For one moment, he understood why men preferred speeches written by women they did not publicly honor. Truth without guidance was terrifying. He spoke anyway. Miss Ava Bennet is no longer in Ashford Palace. A murmur moved through the crowd. Not shock. Confirmation. She left before dawn. A widow covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Why?" Rowan heard it. The whole court behind him heard it. Isabella stood in the archway, unseen by most, still and pale. Noah remained at Rowan's right shoulder, not interfering. Rowan looked down at the people Ava had remembered. Because this kingdom accepted her service without giving her standing. Because I accepted her loyalty without giving her honor. Because yesterday, before witnesses, I named another woman for Ashford's future and allowed Miss Bennet to be spoken of as if her place were beneath that decision. The crowd went very still. Elder Warren behind him inhaled sharply. Rowan continued before cowardice could return. She left us an accounting of work performed without title. We will enter it into record. We will correct the systems that depended on her silence. Healer routes will be protected. Widow relief will move before ceremony expense. Treaty records will no longer rest in one pair of unpaid hands. His voice tightened. She is not to be called unstable. She is not to be called jealous. She is not to be called ungrateful. Noah's jaw shifted beside him. Approval, perhaps. Or pain. Rowan looked toward the southern widows. She was wronged here. The words entered Ashford publicly. At last. Too late for Ava to stand under them. But not too late to keep the lie from growing. The crowd did not applaud. Good. Applause would have been obscene. One of the widows stepped forward. Mrs. Hale. Ava had seated her away from Lord Benton's family. Will she come back? The woman asked. The question struck Rowan harder than accusation. He had no right to make hope from it. No, he said. The word cost him. I do not know, and we will not demand it. The widow studied him, then nodded once. Not comfort. Judgment postponed. Rowan accepted it. When he returned to the council chamber, Elder Warren looked furious. That admission will weaken the crown. Rowan opened Ava's ledger again. No. The crown was weakened when it needed a hidden woman to make it appear whole. Isabella rose from her chair. Then the Luna presentation should be annulled. The room turned. Rowan looked at her. She held his gaze, afraid but clear. I was presented yesterday under false completeness. The kingdom was not told what it cost. I will not accept a title that requires Ava Bennet's erasure to look lawful. Benton snapped. Lady Crane, you cannot simply undo a public blessing. Isabella touched her bare throat. Watch me try. For the first time since morning, something like life moved through the room. Not joy, not peace. Consequence. Rowan looked at Isabella and saw what he should have respected sooner. She, too, had been chosen as image before person. That did not excuse her silence. But perhaps she would no longer lend herself to it. The presentation is suspended, Rowan said. No Luna title will be finalized until the council reforms are enacted and publicly witnessed. Warren looked near collapse. The kingdom needs stability. The kingdom had stability, Noah said. It left through the healer gate. No one argued. By nightfall, Ashford Palace looked different. Not visibly, perhaps. The banners still hung. The marble still shone. The throne still dominated the royal hall. But the Luna chair had been removed. Isabella ordered it covered and carried to storage herself. When the servants hesitated, she lifted one end of the blue cushion with her own hands. That image traveled through the palace faster than any decree. The future Luna carrying away the chair she had refused. Rowan spent the evening in the archive with Noah, Sister Margaret, and 3 exhausted clerks, transferring Ava's ledger into central record. Each entry became a task assigned to an office that should have existed before her pain made it necessary. Healer access protocol. Widow seating grievance file. Emergency tincture authority. Treaty phrase index. War injury accommodation list. He read until his eyes burned. Noah took over when his voice failed. No one commented. At midnight, Rowan returned to Ava's room. Alone. The ring still lay on the desk. The necklace was gone. Isabella had taken it to the council vault, refusing to wear or destroy it until the kingdom decided what honor should mean after truth. The keys remained. The cloak clasp remained. The room was colder than before. Or perhaps he had finally stopped pretending his skin could not feel it. He sat at her desk. For a long time, he did nothing. Then he took a blank sheet of paper. His hand hovered. A letter would be selfish if written too soon. An apology might become another hand reaching across a door she had locked. Still, words pressed against him. Not to send. To understand. He wrote, Ava, I called at your place because I was too afraid to name mine beside you. He stared at the sentence, then crossed out Ava. Not because she did not deserve her name, because he did not deserve to use it privately after failing it publicly. He wrote again, Miss Bennet, then stopped. Nothing after that was clean enough. He folded the unfinished page and placed it beneath the ledger copy, unsent. A king used to command could at least learn restraint after ruin. Outside the window, the eastern road lay dark. Somewhere beyond it, Ava was moving farther from the palace that had believed her loyalty was permanent because her love had been quiet. Rowan placed the lunar ring in a small plain box. Not velvet, not royal, plain wood. He did not know what should happen to it, only that it should no longer sit like a wound exposed for his education. He placed the box beside the ledger, then leaned back in the chair where she had written inventory of duties performed without title. He imagined her writing those words after he stood at her door and told her not to become difficult. His throat tightened. Difficult. He almost laughed. God, what a small, cowardly word. Ava had not become difficult. She had become accurate. By dawn, the first official reform orders were drafted. By mid-morning, the kingdom knew the second ceremony was cancelled. By evening, every office in Ashford had received copies of duties that would no longer be carried by unnamed women after midnight. It was not redemption. It was not enough. It was only the first day of consequences. Far east, Ava Bennet did not yet know any of it. She rode beside healer crates toward Bellwether, with rain drying on her gray cloak and no ring beneath her glove. The kingdom was beginning to say her name correctly, but she was no longer there to hear it. That, Rowan understood as the sun rose over Ashford's silver banners, was the truest measure of how late they had become. The room that accused Rowan Whitlock did not speak in Ava Bennet's voice. That was why it hurt more. A voice could be answered. A letter could be folded. A woman standing before him could be interrupted, pleaded with, misunderstood, wounded again by a man desperate to turn consequence into conversation. But Ava's room had no mercy of reply. It only held evidence. The narrow bed made too neatly. The window left open to cold morning air. The keys lined in order of service. The old cloak clasp repaired by hands he had never thanked enough. The plain wooden box now holding the lunar ring he had once pressed into her palm with all the cowardice of a man asking devotion to wait where honor would not stand. And the ledger, always the ledger. Rowan returned to it after the first day of reforms, after the council had scattered under the weight of duties they should have carried years ago, after Isabella ordered the Luna chair removed, after Noah Reed sent riders east with one instruction only: offer aid if requested, do not follow if refused. By then, Ashford Palace had become quiet in a new way. Not sleeping, listening. Everyone seemed to understand that the woman they had called discreet, helpful, loyal, and sensible had left behind a silence too structured to be dismissed as grief. Rowan sat at Ava's desk with one candle burning beside him. He had no right to sit there. He knew that. He sat anyway because the kingdom had begun inside these pages more honestly than it had begun under his throne. The ledger opened to a section marked simply, Private Crown Failures Prevented. His hand stilled. He almost closed it. Pride flinched even after regret had entered the room. Then he forced himself to read. Northern Tax Decree softened before signature. Original wording would have punished 3 villages for late tribute after flood damage. Rowan remembered that decree. He remembered signing the corrected version. He did not remember asking who had fixed it. Southern Widow Fund redirected after Benton attempted delay. He remembered the widows thanking him. He had accepted their gratitude. West Bridge Patrol rotation amended before Captain collapsed from old wound. He remembered praising Captain Morris for endurance. He had not known Ava had noticed the man could barely stand. Nightmare schedule around war anniversary. Keep public vows light. Avoid blood oath language after sunset. Rowan stopped. The candle flame moved. His throat tightened around something too late to be called surprise. She had not only managed his kingdom, she had managed his damage. Quietly, carefully, without ever using his weakness against him. And he had repaid her by making her weakness public. No, worse. He had made her love public only as something beneath him. A soft knock sounded at the door. Rowan did not answer at first. Then, enter. Noah came in. No ceremony armor. No polished court cloak. Only a dark guard coat, rain still drying at the shoulders. He looked at the ledger, then at Rowan. The riders reached Bellwether. Rowan stood too quickly. The chair scraped. Noah's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. She is alive. Safe. Safe. The word entered Rowan with such force that his fingers gripped the desk. He had no right to relief. He took it anyway, then hated himself for needing even that from knowledge of her. Where, he asked. Bellwether Healer Station. She arrived with Mary Collins's supply wagon, helped sort medicine crates, corrected their lung fever records before resting. Of course she had. The ache in Rowan's chest deepened until it became almost steady. What did the riders do? What you ordered. Offered assistance from a distance. And Noah's jaw tightened slightly. She refused Ashford escort. Rowan looked toward the open window. The night beyond it was black. What did she say? Noah took a folded slip from his coat. She gave no letter. Only a message for the record. For me. For the record, Noah repeated. Rowan accepted the distinction. He deserved it. Noah unfolded the slip and read. Miss Bennett states she is not missing, not abducted, not unstable, and not requesting retrieval. She asks that Bellwether receive lung fever supplies through the existing route, not as compensation for her departure. Rowan closed his eyes. Even now, she protected the practical need from being swallowed by his guilt. Noah continued, voice lower. She also said, do not let him rename my leaving into worry. The sentence struck clean. Rowan opened his eyes. Not rename my leaving into worry. There it was. The thing he had been tempted to do. The noble lie of the guilty man. I was worried. I only wanted to know you were safe. I sent riders because I care. But Ava knew him too well. She knew concern could become another crown placed over control. She had cut the path before he stepped onto it. Good. Painful. Good. She is right, Rowan said. Noah studied him. Yes. Once, that yes might have angered him. Now it steadied him. He needed men around him who could say yes to his shame without asking to be forgiven for honesty. Rowan sat again, slowly. Do not send more riders. Noah nodded. I thought you might say that. Did you? I hoped. The word landed between them. Rowan accepted that too. After Noah left, Rowan remained with the ledger until dawn. He read everything. Not all the details. No man could absorb in one night what a woman had carried for years. But he read until the pattern could no longer be ignored. Everywhere Ashford had appeared smooth, Ava had been underneath. Not as decoration, as structure. Everywhere Rowan had appeared controlled, Ava had been nearby with a softened phrase, a corrected order, a delayed public vow, a bitter tea, a quiet warning, a hand withdrawn before witnesses made tenderness costly. He had built his strength out of her restraint, then called her place beneath the woman he chose for appearance. At sunrise, he carried the ledger to the council chamber. Everyone was waiting. Not comfortably. Good. Isabella sat at the working bench again, not the Luna chair. The official necklace was gone to the vault. She wore a plain dress and had ink on one finger from copying Bellwether supply routes herself. Elder Warren looked as though he had aged 5 years overnight. Lord Benton looked offended by the idea of consequences. Noah stood at the door. Sister Margaret sat at the table for the first time in her life. That was Ava's absence too. It had pulled people into rooms where they should have been heard before. Rowan placed the ledger in the center. We begin with Bellwether. Warren frowned. Your Majesty, the Northern Envoy still requires. The Northern Envoy is delayed because we ignored the corrected reply Miss Bennett left us. That is being handled. Bellwether has lung fever risk after frost and delayed supplies because no one entered her route plan into Central Record. Sister Margaret lifted a document. The supplies are ready. Send them. Under whose authority? The question was careful, not defiant. Necessary. Rowan looked around the table. Yours. The healer went still. My authority? Yes. Medical Emergency Release Authority will sit with the healer wing, not the council. Warren protested immediately. That is a significant transfer. It is a correction. The council must retain oversight. After release, Rowan said. Not before sick children receive medicine. Noah's gaze moved to him. Ava's language. Not stolen, Rowan hoped. Learned. There was a difference. Ava had paid too much for him to learn it. He would not pretend the lesson was his own brilliance. Enter the reform, he said. Name the source. The clerk looked up. What source, Your Majesty? Rowan's voice did not falter. Based on the inventory and route structures left by Miss Ava Bennett. The clerk wrote it. Publicly. In council record. Ava Bennett. Not assistant. Not loyal woman. Not one who understood her place. A name attached to policy. Isabella spoke next. I request permission to travel to Bellwether with the supplies. The room shifted. Rowan looked at her. Why? Her hands folded once. Because I sat in silver while that route waited. Because if I am to remain in Ashford at all, I should learn what its ceremonies delay. Warren looked horrified. Lady Crane, you cannot ride with medicine carts like a village courier. Isabella turned to him. Then perhaps village couriers understand the kingdom better than I do. Sister Margaret's mouth moved faintly. Almost a smile. Rowan studied Isabella for a long moment. This did not absolve her. She knew that. He could see it in the way she did not ask the room to praise her for offering. Go, he said. With Sister Margaret's authority. Not mine. Isabella nodded. Understood. By noon, Bellwether supplies left through the Healer Gate. Not the Royal Gate. Not under ceremony. Under practical witness. Isabella rode beside Sister Margaret in a plain dark cloak. Noah sent 2 guards. No banners. No music. People watched from the lower courtyard. Whispers followed the wagon. Let them. A kingdom that whispered lies for years could learn to whisper truth awkwardly at first. Rowan stood at the Healer Gate after the wagon passed. The same gate Ava had used. The iron looked ordinary in daylight. Narrow. Scratched. Functional. He wondered how many times she had stood there with medicine orders, grief letters, and uncredited authority in her hands while he received reports in rooms warmed by her work. Noah stood beside him. She went through here calmly, Noah said. Rowan did not ask how he knew to speak of it. Perhaps Noah had seen his face. Perhaps some wounds became visible only after it was too late to hide them. She did not look back? Rowan asked. No, the answer hurt. Good. She should not have had to, Rowan said. Noah said nothing. That was agreement enough. 3 days later, Isabella returned from Bellwether changed in ways the court did not know how to admire. Her hands were roughened from carrying crates. Her hem was stained with road mud. The official necklace remained in the vault. She brought back a report from Mary Collins and a sealed note from the Bellwether Healer Station. Not from Ava. Rowan knew before the seal broke. Still, his heart behaved foolishly. Lung fever supplies received. Route delay corrected. Miss Bennett departed east with Clinic Records caravan toward Greyhaven. Greyhaven, a neutral city beyond Ashford's direct reach. Large enough to begin again. Strong enough to refuse royal retrieval. Rowan read the line twice. Departed east. Not fleeing. Departing. Ava had always known the dignity of accurate verbs. Isabella stood across from him in the council chamber. She helped them build a fever chart before she left, she said. Of course she did. The words came from Rowan, Noah, and Sister Margaret almost at once. For the first time, the room held something close to shared grief. Not enough to claim her. Enough to recognize the shape of what had gone. Warren spoke carefully. Should we send formal correspondence to Greyhaven? Rowan looked at the note. He imagined the letter. Miss Bennett, return. Miss Bennett, I apologize. Miss Bennett, the kingdom needs. No? That phrase was dead. It had to remain dead. The correspondence will be through official council channels only, he said. No personal letter. Isabella's face softened with something like approval. Noah nodded once. Warren looked confused. But your majesty, surely you wish to speak with her. Rowan looked at him. Yes. The honesty surprised the room. Then he continued. And wishing is not authority. No one answered. Good. Let that be written somewhere too. That night, Rowan returned again to Ava's room. Less often now. Not because the wound hurt less. Because he was beginning to understand that turning her absence into a shrine was still a way of keeping her life centered around him. He stood at the desk. The wooden box held the ring. The keys had been moved to central office, each one reassigned with record and title. The cloak clasp remained. He picked it up, then put it down. No, not as penance. Not anymore. The next morning, he gave it to Sister Margaret. Sell this, he said. She looked startled. It is yours. No. It was maintained by Miss Bennett's labor. Use the funds for the Bellwether lung fever route. The healer understood. Her eyes lowered. Yes, your majesty. The clasp left Ashford in a healer's purse before noon. A silver wolf turned into medicine. That was perhaps the first thing from his private life that had become useful without using Ava. Weeks passed. Ashford improved badly. Then slightly better. Mistakes still happened. That was important. The kingdom learned to fix them without asking where Ava had written the answer. The grief office opened. The healer wing gained authority. Widow seating became more than courtesy. It became record. Treaty notes required named reviewers. Unpaid work done by women in private rooms was entered, titled, and compensated. Some nobles complained that the palace had become bureaucratic. Noah said bureaucracy was apparently what happened when women stopped saving men from paperwork. Rowan did not laugh, but he remembered the sentence. One morning, a formal notice arrived from Greyhaven. It named Ava Bennett as Provisional Civic Records Consultant to the Eastern Clinic Board. Provisional. Temporary. Paid. Named. The notice requested Ashford's release of any claim to Ava Bennett's former palace duties, titles, or informal obligations. Rowan stood in counsel as the clerk read it aloud. Informal obligations. The phrase was too polite. It meant invisible chains. Warren began. We should consider whether. No, Rowan said. The room stopped. Prepare the release. Full release. Full. Isabella looked at him. Noah did too. Rowan kept his gaze on the notice. And include confirmation that Miss Bennett left Ashford by her own will, under no debt, no pending duty, and no obligation to return. The clerk wrote. Each word cost something. Each word freed something more important. When the document was ready, Rowan signed it. Alpha King Rowan Whitlock. His signature looked the same as it always had. The man signing it did not. After the council adjourned, Isabella remained behind. She is building a life, she said. Yes. Does that make it easier? Rowan looked toward the empty space where the Luna chair had once stood. No, a pause. Better. Isabella nodded slowly. I understand. Perhaps she did. Perhaps she was beginning to. That was enough. Spring rain came early that year. It washed dust from the silver banners and made the healer road difficult, which meant the new route system was tested sooner than expected. It held. Bellwether received medicine before the first fever cluster worsened. Briar Glen received spare cloth. Southern Widows received grain credit without Ava moving a single page. The kingdom stood. Not because she stayed. Because she had left behind a standard they could no longer pretend not to see. And in Greyhaven, beyond Ashford's reach, Ava Bennett received the release bearing Rowan's seal. Rowan never saw her read it. He imagined it anyway, though he tried not to. A gray cloak. Soft white face. Steady eyes. The ring mark gone from her finger. Her name written on a new desk in a city that had no memory of her standing below a silver chair. He hoped she felt relief. He did not hope she missed him. That distinction was the only honest progress his heart had made. At dusk, Rowan stood at the healer gate alone. No riders waited. No command rested on his tongue. The road east was wet with rain, empty and open. He had chosen another woman in front of the kingdom. By morning, Ava was gone. Now, weeks later, the kingdom still spoke her name. Not loudly. Not enough. But correctly more often than before. Miss Bennett. Civic Records Consultant. The woman whose place had never been beneath a promise. Rowan looked at the road until the light faded. Then he turned back to Ashford. There was work waiting. Not grief. Work. The kind Ava had done quietly while everyone praised him for order. The difference now was that her name would not be removed from it. Not again. And if regret was to mean anything more than a king mourning the comfort he lost, it would have to spend the rest of its life protecting the truth she left behind. A woman can be silent for years and still not consent to being diminished. A promise can be private and still become a betrayal when broken in public. And the place a man gives a woman is meaningless compared to the place she finally chooses for herself. Greyhaven did not welcome Ava Bennett like a woman from a ruined promise. That was why she stayed long enough to breathe. The city had no interest in her humiliation. No one at the eastern gate asked whether she had once stood below a Luna chair while another woman wore silver. No one cared that Alpha King Rowan Whitlock had chosen Isabella Crane before an applauding kingdom. No one lowered their voice at the sight of her round, pale face and tired eyes, trying to guess whether she had been abandoned, dismissed, or simply foolish enough to believe a private promise. Greyhaven asked 3 questions. Name, skill, purpose. Ava stood before the city clerk in a rain-damp gray cloak, her satchel at her feet, her hands empty of ring, keys, and Ashford's hidden expectations. Ava Bennett, she said. The clerk, a woman with copper-gray hair and spectacles low on her nose, dipped her pen. Skill. Ava paused. Not because she lacked one. Because for years, Her skills had been scattered through other people's authority. Treaty correction, healer routing, widow relief, ceremony logistics, grief seating, fever supply prediction, king management. No, not that last one. Never again. I keep records from killing people, Ava said. The clerk looked up. For one breath, silence held. Then the woman smiled faintly. That is either arrogance or experience. Experience. Purpose. Ava looked past the clerk to the street beyond the gatehouse. Greyhaven rose in layered stone and lantern light. Canals cutting silver lines through the city, wagons moving under arched bridges, clinic bells ringing somewhere in the distance. Purpose. At Ashford, purpose had always arrived attached to Rowan's need. Here, the word waited without chains. To work, Ava said, and not belong to anyone while doing it. The clerk studied her, then stamped the entry paper. Temporary civic lodging. 3 days. Records office will test your skill tomorrow morning. Ava blinked. That quickly. People are sick quickly. Ledgers fail quickly. We do not make useful women wait in corridors to prove men important. Ava looked at her. The words reached somewhere tender. Dangerously tender. What is your name? She asked. Eleanor Pike. Thank you, Mrs. Pike. Do not thank me yet. The East Clinic records are a disgrace. For the first time in days, something almost like a smile touched Ava's mouth. Almost. Her lodging was a narrow room above a candle shop on Wren Street. The stairs leaned. The window stuck. The mattress smelled faintly of lavender and old dust. A brass basin sat in the corner. A small writing desk faced the canal. No silver curtains. No royal seal. No chair waiting for another woman. Ava placed her satchel on the bed and stood in the center of the room until the silence settled around her. This silence was different from Ashford's. Ashford's silence had listened for her service. This one simply existed. She removed her cloak, hung it near the window, and finally looked at her left hand. The ring mark had faded, barely visible now, a faint circle where silver had pressed beneath years of waiting. She touched the skin. No pain, only memory. That almost made her cry. Almost. But tears had learned patience from her, and tonight they stayed back. The next morning, Greyhaven tested her with cruelty disguised as paperwork. Eleanor Pike placed 6 clinic ledgers on a table and said, "Find the reason why medicine arrives late in South Canal every frost season." 3 clerks watched from nearby desks with the polite skepticism of people who had seen many desperate strangers invent competence. Ava sat, opened the first ledger, then the second, then the third. The room faded. Not from emotion, from focus. Numbers had habits. So did neglect. She traced dates, supply marks, physician requests, canal toll classifications, weather delays, duplicate herb names, and signatures from men who approved things only after a crisis looked respectable enough to frighten them. 2 hours later, she pushed one ledger aside. Your medicines are not late because of shortage. Eleanor looked up. Go on. They are late because South Canal is classified as trade overflow during frost, not medical priority. The toll office delays small crates behind merchant wagons. Fever tinctures sit at bridge inspection while grain moves first because grain has noble contracts. One clerk frowned. That cannot be the whole issue. It is not. Ava turned another page. You also count silverleaf and winter salve separately, but the clinic uses them for the same lung treatment. That creates false inventory confidence. The room became very still. She continued. And your widow credits are filed under household heads, not patient names. So children whose fathers died are disappearing from the medicine claim list when mothers remarry or relocate. No one spoke. Ava looked up. Eleanor Pike's face had changed. Not softened. Sharpened with interest. What would you change first? Classification before frost. Medical crates sealed at origin and cleared before merchant cargo. Herb names standardized. Widow credit attached to patient, not household authority. And someone with actual authority must review illness pattern before council finance does. One clerk said, that would disrupt trade. Ava looked at him. So does a dead child. The clerk went red. Eleanor's mouth twitched. Direct. Necessary. Expensive. Less than winter funeral support. The room went silent again. Ava waited for the familiar dismissal. Soft woman. Emotional reasoning. Too much care. Not enough court sense. Instead, Eleanor Pike closed the ledger. Write the plan. Ava's breath caught. Now. Unless you need a nap after being correct. The almost smile came again. This time, it stayed longer. By evening, Ava had a desk in the temporary records annex. Not an office. Not yet. Only a desk near the back wall, beneath a shelf of badly labeled maps, with a cracked inkwell and one drawer that did not close properly. It felt more honest than any hidden ring. Eleanor placed a small placard beside the inkwell. Ava Bennett, temporary records consultant. Temporary. Ava liked the word. It did not trap. It did not promise later while stealing now. It simply told the truth. She worked until the city bell struck 6. Then Eleanor appeared beside her desk and closed the ledger with one firm hand. Ava looked up, startled. I am not finished. You are done for today. There are 3 more routes. They will remain illogical overnight. I can finish the second. You can eat. Ava stared at her. In Ashford, no one stopped her from working late unless they needed her somewhere else. Eleanor adjusted her spectacles. Greyhaven does not pay women to become ghosts in civic offices. Go eat, Miss Bennett. Ava did not know what to say, so she said the simplest thing. Yes, Mrs. Pike. Outside, evening had settled over the canals. Lanterns glowed along the bridges. Vendors called out warm bread, roasted chestnuts, fish stew, ink refills, candle bundles. People moved through the city with the practical exhaustion of lives that did not revolve around a throne. Ava bought bread from a woman with flour on her sleeves. The woman wrapped it in paper and said, New to Greyhaven? Yes. Running from something or towards something? Ava paused. The question should have felt invasive. It did not. Maybe because the woman asked without pity. Both, Ava said. The vendor nodded. Best kind. Costs more. Lasts longer. Ava carried the bread to the canal bridge and ate it there, standing under a lantern while spring mist rose from the water. For the first time since leaving Ashford, no one knew where she was before needing something from her. No palace bells. No healer panic. No counsel waiting for her invisible hand. No Rowan behind a door, asking her to open because he had decided too late that speaking might be useful. Only Greyhaven. Only bread. Only a desk with her name on it. Temporary, yes, but visible. That night, back in the room above the candle shop, Ava lit one small lamp and sat by the window. She thought of Ashford then, not because she wanted to return, because memory did not ask permission before entering. She imagined Rowan finding the ledger, the ring, the word's position vacated. She imagined Isabella removing the necklace, Noah standing by the healer gate, the kingdom rearranging itself around absence. She hoped Bellwether received the medicine. That hope did not feel like weakness. Care, she was learning, did not require return. It only required freedom from being used as proof that harm had been acceptable. A knock came softly at her door. Ava stiffened, then remembered where she was. Who is it? Mrs. Vale from downstairs. I made too much stew. Ava blinked. The candle shop widow. She opened the door. The older woman stood with a covered bowl in her hands, face stern beneath silver hair. I do not give second servings to people who look tragic and pretend bread is supper, Mrs. Vale said. Ava almost laughed. I paid for the room. You did not pay to faint on my stairs. The bowl was pushed into her hands. Warm. Heavy. No expectation attached except common decency. Ava looked down at it. Thank you. Mrs. Vale sniffed. Eat before it cools. Then she left. Ava closed the door and stood with the stew in her hands. For years, she had fed Rowan's kingdom pieces of herself and called it loyalty. Tonight, a stranger had fed her because she looked tired. The difference nearly undid her. She sat at the desk and ate slowly. The stew was too salty. It was perfect. Afterward, she took a blank sheet of paper from her satchel and wrote one line. Not to Rowan. Not to Noah. Not to Ashford. To herself. I am allowed to stay where I am seen before I am needed. She read it twice, then folded it and placed it in the drawer that did not close properly. The next morning, she returned to the records annex before the bells. Old habit. Eleanor Pike was already there, holding coffee in judgment. You are early. So are you. I am old. We do not sleep. You are wounded, and pretending paperwork is medicine. Ava stopped. The words were too accurate. Eleanor handed her a cup. Fortunately, paperwork is sometimes medicine, but not the only kind. Ava accepted the coffee. It was bitter, not like Rowan's tea. Good. I will remember that, she said. No, you will forget. I will remind you. And somehow, In a narrow civic office with crooked shelves and terrible coffee, Ava Bennett felt something inside her loosen. Not heal. Not yet. Healing was too large for 1 week. But loosen. Enough to breathe around the place where the promise had been. By noon, the South Canal classification plan was approved for trial. By dusk, Ava had corrected widow credit structures. By night, 3 clerks who had doubted her were arguing with her properly. Not dismissing. Arguing. That mattered. A woman could be challenged without being diminished. Ava walked home under lantern light with ink on her fingers and no ring mark visible on her hand. At the bridge, she stopped. The canal water moved below, dark and steady, carrying reflections of lamps that belonged to no palace. She looked east, then west. The west still existed. Ashford still existed. Rowan still existed. But none of them stood between her and the next morning. For the first time, Ava wondered not where she would go after Greyhaven, but what she might build if she stayed. The thought did not frighten her. It waited, quietly, like a door she owned the key to. By the 3rd week in Greyhaven, Ava Bennett had stopped waking before dawn for a king who no longer had any claim on her mornings. That was how she measured healing. Not by whether Rowan Whitlock's name still hurt. It did. Not by whether the memory of the silver Luna chair still rose when she saw pale gowns in shop windows. It did. Not by whether the word place had lost its edge. It had not. Healing came smaller. A morning when she opened her eyes and did not immediately count duties for Ashford. A cup of bitter coffee that belonged to her own desk. A clerk knocking before entering. A widow saying her son's medicine had arrived on time. A room that kept her name visible even when she was not inside it. The temporary records annex no longer looked temporary around her. That unsettled Ava more than she admitted. Her desk had gained a second drawer, because one drawer that refused to close was not enough for fever maps, widow credits, bridge toll revisions, and the growing stack of South Canal medical corridor reports. Eleanor Pike had placed 3 labeled boxes beside the shelf and said, "If you insist on making chaos ashamed of itself, give it somewhere to sit." Ava had accepted the boxes, then reorganized the entire shelf. Eleanor pretended not to approve. Everyone knew she did. On Monday morning, Ava arrived to find a small brass nameplate on her desk. Ava Bennett, records consultant. No temporary. She stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, the annex moved around her. Clerks carried files. Someone argued with a messenger about canal permits. Eleanor corrected a man's grammar so sharply he apologized to the sentence. Ava only looked at the nameplate. No temporary. The word had protected her. It had meant she could leave. It had meant no one had trapped her with kindness disguised as future. Now its absence felt like an offered chair. Not a throne. Not a promise whispered in a corridor. A chair at a desk she had chosen. Eleanor appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee. If you hate it, blame Peter Alden. If you like it, it was my idea. Ava did not take the coffee yet. You removed temporary. It became inaccurate. Ava's throat tightened. That was not your decision. No, Eleanor said. It is yours. The plate can remain in the drawer until you decide. That helped. Choice always did. Ava reached out and touched the brass lightly with 2 fingers. The letters were cool. Steady. Her name did not ask her to wait for anyone else's courage. Leave it, she said. Eleanor handed her the coffee. Good. Now that you have been emotionally recognized by metal, there are 6 disastrous ledgers waiting. Ava almost laughed. Then did. Softly. It startled one of the younger clerks. He looked over. Eleanor pointed at him. Back to work. Women are allowed to laugh near government paper. The clerk lowered his head quickly. Ava sat behind the desk, still smiling faintly, and opened the first ledger. Work settled her. Not the old kind of work. Not the work that consumed her until she became useful enough to disappear. This work had edges. Hours. Authority. Disagreement. Payment. Her signature triggered action without requiring her to borrow someone else's seal. That was new. That was power in its most practical form. At noon, a formal letter arrived from Ashford. The messenger wore neutral gray, not royal black. Good. Ava looked at the seal before touching it. Plain wax. No wolf crest stamped deep enough to feel like command. Eleanor watched from across the annex. You can have it recorded unopened. I know. And burned. I know. And thrown at a clerk if necessary, though preferably not one of ours. Ava looked at her. Eleanor sipped coffee. I believe in options. Ava broke the seal. Inside was Ashford's release document, already copied through Greyhaven Council. No claim on Ava Bennett's former palace duties. No pending debt. No informal obligation. No request for return. No personal message. At the bottom, Rowan's signature. Alpha King Rowan Whitlock. Her chest tightened. Only once. Then loosened. The document did not ask her to feel anything. That was perhaps the first respectful thing Ashford had sent. She read the final line again. Miss Ava Bennett departed Ashford by her own will. Her own will. A simple phrase. A legal one. Yet it felt like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed too long. Ava placed the document on her desk. Enter it into record, she said. Eleanor nodded. Personal archive as well. Ava considered. Yes. Both truths. The wound and the proof she had left it. That afternoon, the South Canal hearing filled the annex chamber beyond capacity. Merchants came angry. Healers came tired. Widows came with documents folded in careful hands. Bridge officials came prepared to defend delay, as if delay had not already harmed enough poor families to deserve a trial. Ava stood at the front with the medical corridor chart behind her. No throne. No ceremony. No silver chair. Only a map, 6 ledgers, and a room willing to argue with evidence. A merchant named Charles Vane objected first. If medical crates receive seasonal priority, trade cargo will suffer. Ava looked at him. People with fever suffer faster. Several widows lowered their eyes to hide small smiles. Vane flushed. I am not suggesting medicine be ignored. No, Ava said. Only slowed in a way that mostly harms people whose names do not appear on your contracts. The room quieted. Eleanor, seated near the wall, looked deeply pleased and deeply unwilling to admit it. A bridge official leaned forward. Your plan assumes clinics will not abuse the medical seal. My plan assumes abuse should be punished after medicine arrives, not prevented by letting children cough through paperwork. A healer whispered, Thank you. Ava heard it. She continued, Every sealed crate will be logged at origin, bridge, and destination. False claim penalties double after verification. But the route clears first. We stop treating suspicion as more urgent than breath. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Peter Alden, representing the clinic board, said, Greyhaven Clinic supports the proposal. Eleanor added, The records office confirms implementation capacity. A widow stood next. Not someone Ava knew. A small woman in a brown shawl with tired eyes and a child asleep against her side. My daughter got medicine 3 days earlier because of the trial route, the widow said. 3 days is the difference between a fever and a grave. No one interrupted after that. The proposal passed before dusk. Not unanimously. Ava liked that. Unanimous rooms were often only frightened rooms wearing agreement. This room had argued, resisted, listened, and moved. That felt real. After the hearing, Peter approached with a folder. You were very effective. Ava took the folder. I was very annoyed. That too. Annoyance is underrated in civic reform. Peter smiled. Greyhaven is discovering that. The compliment warmed her without trapping her. That difference still surprised her. As people left the chamber, one of the younger clerks carried in another packet. Miss Bennett. From Ashford, through neutral civic channel. Ava looked at it. Personal correspondence. She knew before opening because the seal was not official. Her body remembered the shape of dread. Eleanor took one step closer. Ava held up a hand. Not to refuse help. To decide first. She looked at the packet. Plain wax. Her name written in Rowan's hand. Miss Bennett. Not Ava. That mattered. Still, the paper felt heavier than it should. She could burn it. She could record it unopened. She could read it and learn that some doors stayed closed even when looked at. Ava opened it. The letter was short. Miss Bennett, Ashford has entered your departure under your own will. The healer route reforms are active. Bellwether received supplies before the latest fever rise. The Luna presentation remains suspended. No reply is expected. Rowan Whitlock. That was all. No apology. No plea. No memory. No I miss you placed like a hook into her healing. Ava stared at the page. It hurt. Not because it was wrong. Because it was finally careful. Part of her hated that he had learned care after care could no longer give him access to her. Part of her was relieved. Both feelings could stand without fighting. Eleanor watched her face. Bad. No good. No annoyingly decent. Ava exhaled. Yes. Eleanor nodded gravely. Worst kind. Harder to throw. Ava folded the letter. Record official facts. Personal note goes to private archive. You are keeping it. Yes. Not because she wanted Rowan near. Because truth mattered. He had written without demanding. That was part of the record too. Even late lessons deserved their correct name. That evening, Ava walked home alone through Wren Street. Rain had washed the stones clean. Lanterns reflected in the canal. A bakery door stood open, warm air breathing cinnamon and yeast into the street. Somewhere, a child argued that medicine tasted worse than sickness, and an adult answered that survival often had poor flavor. Ava smiled to herself. At the candle shop, Mrs. Vale was waiting with stew again. I am beginning to think you make too much on purpose, Ava said. I am beginning to think you notice too much for a woman accepting free stew. Ava took the bowl. Thank you. Eat before gratitude ruins the temperature. Inside her room, Ava set the stew on the desk and removed the Ashford release document copy from her satchel. She placed it beside the folded note she had written to herself weeks earlier. I am allowed to stay where I am seen before I am needed. The sentence looked less fragile now, more like policy. She opened the window. Greyhaven air entered, damp and cool. On the canal below, lights moved across the water in broken gold. For the first time, she allowed herself to think of Isabella without immediate pain. Not kindly, not cruelly, accurately. A woman in silver who had chosen silence until silence became unbearable. A woman now sitting somewhere in Ashford, perhaps learning how heavy public symbols became when stripped of applause. Let her learn. Ava did not need to guide her through it. She thought of Noah, his face at the healer gate, his admission that he should have spoken sooner. Let him speak sooner next time. She thought of Rowan, his hand on the Luna chair, his voice saying her place, his later signature releasing every claim. Let him live with both. Then she thought of herself, not as the woman below the dais, not as the hidden ring, not as the vacant position in Ashford's structure, as the woman who had stood before Greyhaven's records board and made merchants admit medicine should move before pride. That woman felt unfamiliar. Ava wanted to know her better. The next morning, Eleanor called a full records meeting. Ava arrived with the South Canal Plan, 3 revised widow credit forms, and no patience for ceremonial delay. At the front of the room, a larger brass plate had been placed on the central table. Ava Bennett, records consultant, medical corridor architect. Ava stopped. Again, she looked at Eleanor. The older woman lifted one brow. The board voted after the hearing. You could have asked. We did. You were busy making Charles Vane regret learning to speak. Ava's mouth twitched. Eleanor softened by 1 degree. The authority is real. The title is accurate. Whether you keep it is your decision. Ava looked at the plate. Medical corridor architect. Not Luna. Not Queen. Not the woman chosen before the kingdom. A title no poem would envy. A title that mint fever crates would cross bridges before politics finished grooming itself. Ava touched the brass. This time, her hand did not tremble. I will keep it. The room accepted that. Not with applause. With work. Forms were passed. Schedules opened. Maps unrolled. Questions began. Ava answered. Corrected. Listened. Changed 2 clauses when a young healer made a better point than hers. That mattered too. Power was not being right forever. Power was building something strong enough to survive correction. At midday, a woman from South Canal came with her daughter, the same child who had slept through the hearing. The girl was awake now, cheeks flushed, but eyes clear. She wanted to say thank you, the mother said. The little girl held out a crooked paper lantern made from folded yellow scraps. Ava took it carefully. It is beautiful. It is for roads, the child said seriously. So medicine does not get lost. Ava looked at the lantern, then at the child, then at the room where maps covered walls and her name sat in brass. Emotion rose suddenly. Not grief. Something brighter. Almost frightening in its warmth. Then I will keep it on my desk, Ava said. The child nodded, satisfied, as if civic infrastructure had been secured. After they left, Ava placed the paper lantern beside her nameplate. Eleanor looked at it. Crooked. Yes. Important. Very. Good. That evening, Ava did not work late. She closed the ledger when the bell struck 6. The habit of leaving on time still felt rebellious. She liked it. At the canal bridge, she paused beneath the lanterns and watched the water move east. Somewhere west, Ashford existed with its reforms, its suspended Luna chair, its king who had learned too late that private promises could not survive public cowardice. Somewhere here, Greyhaven existed with terrible coffee, stubborn clerks, medical corridors, and a desk bearing her name. Ava breathed. The air did not hurt going in. Not fully. For the first time, she understood that healing was not returning to the woman she had been before Rowan. That woman had loved faithfully. She deserved honor. But Ava did not need to become her again. She could become someone built from what remained after the promise burned out. Someone practical, soft, difficult, visible. Someone whose place was no longer assigned by a man choosing comfort before a crowd. Rain began again, fine and silver under the street lamps. Ava lifted her hood and walked home slowly. No one waited at a palace door. No one needed her before dawn. No hidden ring pressed against her skin. Only a brass nameplate, a crooked paper lantern, and a city learning her value before daring to ask for her sacrifice. That was enough. More than enough. For now, it was everything. The first time Ashford needed Greyhaven's medical corridor, Ava Bennett was not in the room as a memory. She was in the room as authority. That difference changed everything. The emergency arrived during rain. Heavy spring rain, thick enough to turn the canal road silver and make every bridge sound like it was breathing under pressure. Ava had been at her desk in the records annex, correcting a dispute over widow credits in South Canal, when a courier came in soaked to the bone. Flood damage on the West Road, he said. 2 medicine wagons stuck outside Briar Glen. Ashford has requested shared corridor access through Greyhaven classification. The room went still. Ashford. Even after months, the name still entered Ava's body before it entered her mind. Not as command anymore. A scar. A quiet tightening beneath the ribs. Then it passed. Ava took the paper. Not from trembling fingers. Not with lowered eyes. As a woman whose title was written in brass on the desk before her. Medical corridor architect. Eleanor Pike stood across the room, watching but not interfering. Good. Choice again. Always choice. Ava read the request once. Then again. It was official, not personal. Issued through Ashford's healer wing. Signed by Sister Margaret. Witnessed by Captain Noah Reed. Approved by Rowan Whitlock, but his name sat where it should, at the bottom, not reaching through the page to own the crisis. The request was clean. That mattered. Ava placed it beside the map. Which wagons? The courier blinked. Pardon. Which wagons? Medicine type. Destination. Patient urgency. He unfolded the second page quickly. Fever tinctures, lung salve, boiled wool, silver thread bandages. Destination, Briar Glen and Bellwether. Urgency marked high. Ava looked at the bridge map. Rain tapped hard against the windows. South Canal can take the overflow if the crates are resealed at Greyhaven Gate 3. Send 2 inspectors. Medical priority holds. Trade cargo waits. One clerk hesitated. Ashford cargo through our corridor may upset merchants. Ava looked up. Then merchants may be upset while children breathe. The clerk wrote quickly. Eleanor's mouth twitched. The room moved. Not beautifully. Effectively. Maps opened. Seals prepared. Messages written. Bridge wardens alerted. Clinic receivers notified. Ava signed 3 emergency clearances and corrected 1 route because the courier had called Bellwether a village when, under corridor law, it was now a protected winter risk settlement. Words mattered. Names mattered. Classification mattered. A woman who had once been classified beneath a promise knew that better than most. By noon, Greyhaven had cleared the first Ashford wagon. By dusk, Briar Glen confirmed receipt. By night, Bellwether reported delivery before the fever rise. No ceremony. No applause. Only medicine arriving where it needed to go. That was the kind of victory Ava trusted. Quiet victories did not ask women to bleed in public first. The next morning, a formal acknowledgement arrived from Ashford. Ava accepted it in the records annex while Eleanor pretended to sort files nearby. The letter was official. Miss Ava Bennett, records consultant and medical corridor architect of Greyhaven. Greyhaven's corridor intervention prevented significant medical delay across Briar Glen and Bellwether. Ashford acknowledges your authority and thanks Greyhaven for the system implemented under your design. Signed beneath, Sister Margaret. Captain Noah Reed. Alpha King Rowan Whitlock. No personal note. No hidden line. No softened memory. Only acknowledgement. Ava read it and felt something inside her loosen. Not forgiveness. Not longing. Something cleaner. A locked door inside the past opening only to let air in. Eleanor asked, record? Yes. Personal archive? Ava considered. No, Eleanor lifted one brow. Ava placed the letter into the official tray. This belongs to the corridor. Not to her heart. Not to old grief. Not to the girl with the hidden ring. To the work. The distinction felt like healing. That afternoon, Greyhaven's council called a public session to review the success of the corridor system. The main civic hall filled quickly. Healers came in blue aprons. Merchants came with folded arms. Bridge officials came with defensive expressions. Mothers came with children who had survived winter cough. Peter Alden sat near the clinic board. Eleanor stood near the record table, severe as judgment and twice as useful. Ava wore the dark green dress Ruth Vale had once insisted made officials nervous, though Ruth had died 3 weeks earlier with a complaint about soup still unfinished on her tongue. Ava carried Ruth's memory like a candle. Not heavy, warm. On her desk at the annex, the crooked paper lantern still stood beside her nameplate. At the front of the hall, the chairman introduced her properly. Miss Ava Bennett, records consultant and medical corridor architect. No one laughed. No one looked confused. No one waited for a man to explain why she stood there. Ava stepped forward. For a moment, she remembered another hall. Black marble, silver banners, the Luna chair, Rowan's hand on Isabella's chair. The kingdom applauding while her own ring sat hidden beneath a glove. Ava understands her place. The memory came, then passed, because this room had no dais beneath which she stood, no throne above her. Only a map, a law, a system that worked because she had made it work. She placed both hands on the lectern. The corridor succeeded because the route was classified before disaster, not during it, she said. Medicine moved first because the law said it must, not because someone important finally became afraid. A few healers nodded. A merchant scowled. Good. Scowling men were sometimes proof the right door had been opened. Ava continued. We will expand seasonal protection to 3 additional routes before frost. Crate seals will remain clinic-originated. Verification stays after delivery. Penalties for false claims will double, but suspicion will not outrank breath. Eleanor wrote that down. Ava noticed. So did half the room. The proposal passed after 2 hours of argument. Not easy. Real. After the session, Peter approached with 2 cups of terrible civic coffee. Congratulations, he said. Ava took one. It passed with conditions. Everything meaningful does. She looked toward the crowd, where a group of healers were already arguing with bridge officials over implementation dates. That used to frighten me. Conditions? Having to keep standing after people disagreed. Peter's expression softened. Does it still? Ava thought about it. No. The answer surprised her with its certainty. No, she repeated. Now I think disagreement is easier than silence. Peter nodded. Silence hides too much. Yes. It did. It had hidden promises. Cowardice. Envy. Comfort. A whole kingdom's dependence on a woman whose name they had not wanted to raise too high. Ava drank the coffee and winced. This is awful. It is a civic tradition. It should be reviewed by law. I will fear your next reform. You should. That evening, Ava walked alone along the canal. Rain had stopped. The water carried broken gold from the lanterns. Greyhaven smelled of wet stone, candle wax, horse leather, and spring leaves beginning to open somewhere behind the walls. She stopped at the bridge where she had once wondered what she might build if she stayed. Now she knew. Not everything. Enough. A corridor. An office. A name that entered law. A life with doors she could open and close herself. Behind her, footsteps approached. Eleanor Pike stopped beside her, holding an umbrella she had clearly brought too late to be useful. You spoke well. Ava smiled faintly. That sounded painful for you. It was excruciating. Thank you. Eleanor looked over the canal. Ashford requested that you attend the Winter Coordination Council in person this year. Ava's smile faded. There is an official request. Yes. From Rowan? From Ashford. Signed by the healer wing first. That mattered. Still, the West lifted its head inside her. Not as longing. As history. Ava looked at the water. Do they need me there? Eleanor did not answer quickly. That was why Ava trusted her. They need the architect of the system, Eleanor said. They do not need the woman they once diminished to comfort them with her presence. Ava breathed. The distinction was kind. Sharper than comfort. Do you think I should go? I think you should decide whether the room deserves your work. Not whether the past deserves your courage. Ava closed her eyes briefly. Ruth would have said something ruder. Probably better. But Eleanor's words would do. When is the council? First frost. Months away. Enough time to know the answer without letting old pain pretend urgency. I will decide later, Ava said. Good. The umbrella snapped open suddenly in Eleanor's hands, though no rain fell. Ava looked at it. Eleanor glared at the metal ribs. Do not start. Ava laughed. A real laugh. Open. Unhidden. It crossed the canal and returned softer. That night, in her room above the candle shop, Ava opened the drawer that did not close properly. Inside lay her first note to herself. I am allowed to stay where I am seen before I am needed. She unfolded it. The paper had softened at the creases. She read it and realized the sentence was no longer a hope. It was a standard. She took a new sheet and wrote beneath it. I am allowed to return to rooms that once diminished me only if I enter under my own name and leave under my own will. She placed both notes together, then sat by the window until the candle burned low. A letter came from Noah 2 days later. Official on the outside. Personal only in its restraint. Miss Bennett, Bellwether reports no fever deaths after the latest delivery. Sister Margaret says your seal sequence exposed 2 false inventory counts. Lady Crane has completed 6 months of service in the grief office and asked that her public review be delayed until the widow board submits assessment. His Majesty has not requested writers. Noah Reed. At the bottom, in smaller writing, I speak sooner now. Ava sat with that line for a while, then folded the letter. Not into the official tray, not into the wound. Into a small box where she kept human things that had learned to become honest too late, but not uselessly. There was room in life for late truth, just not always for return. Summer came, then faded. Greyhaven's corridor expanded. Ava's office grew too crowded. The city board moved her into a larger room with 2 windows and a door that locked smoothly. Eleanor insisted the old desk come with her because women should not abandon furniture that has survived government reform. The brass nameplate followed. So did the crooked paper lantern. So did Ava. By first frost, the Winter Coordination Council arrived. Neutral ground. Not Ashford Palace. Never Ashford Palace. Ava chose to attend. Not to face Rowan. Not to prove she was healed. Not to make the story beautiful for anyone watching. She attended because the road system was hers, and no one else would explain its weak points with the same ruthless care. On the morning of departure, she wore a dark blue dress, practical boots, and the lantern pin near her collar. Eleanor traveled with her. Peter carried the medical maps. 2 Greyhaven clerks argued over ink all the way to the border. Ava found the sound comforting. The neutral council house stood beneath bare trees, stone walls damp with frost. Delegations arrived from 3 territories. Ashford's banner was present outside, small under neutral law. Ava stepped from the carriage. Her breath showed white in the air. Across the courtyard, Noah saw her first. He bowed. Correctly. Miss Bennett. Captain Reed. His face had changed since the healer gate. Less burdened by silence. More lined by use. Good. Then Isabella Crane emerged from the Ashford delegation. No silver. Dark wool dress. Hair simply pinned. A grief office badge at her collar. She stopped several paces away. Miss Bennett. Lady Crane. Isabella accepted the distance. I am glad the Bellwether route held. So am I. No more was needed. Then Rowan appeared. Ava felt the courtyard still around him, though perhaps that was only memory. He wore a black coat, without ceremony medal. His hair was darker under the winter light. His face was still handsome, still powerful, but the old certainty had weathered into something quieter. He did not approach until she looked at him. That mattered. He stopped far enough away that no one could mistake the moment for claim. Miss Bennett, he said. Alpha King Whitlock. The title did not cut this time. It simply stood where it belonged. His gaze moved to her lantern pin, then to the medical maps in Peter's arms, then back to her face. You look well. Ava considered the sentence. Once, she would have searched it for hidden longing. Now she heard only an observation. I am, she said. A flicker crossed his face. Pain, perhaps. Relief. Both denied the right to become request. Good, he said. Only that. Good. The council bell rang. Delegates began entering. Rowan stepped aside before anyone prompted him. Ava walked past him through the main door. Not beneath him. Not behind him. Through the same entrance. The chamber inside held no throne, no luna chair, no silver dais. Only tables arranged by region and function. Greyhaven's place waited near the center. Her nameplate stood there. Ava Bennett, medical corridor architect. She touched it once, then sat. Across the room, Rowan sat with Ashford. Isabella opened her grief office reports. Noah unfolded patrol maps. Eleanor leaned toward Ava and murmured, "If any man says seasonal classification is too expensive, I may bite him." Ava looked down to hide her smile. The chairman called the council to order. The first issue was the northern winter route. Ava stood, not because someone placed her there, because the work required her voice. "The route will fail if you wait for snow reports," she said. "Snow is not the first warning. Lung reports are." The room listened. Some agreed. Some prepared to argue. Ava welcomed both. As she spoke, she felt the past behind her, but not around her throat. The girl with the hidden ring had brought her here. The woman before the council would not abandon her. She would simply keep walking, under her own name, with her own door, toward the work she chose, and away from every place that called her silence consent. Outside, frost silvered the road. Inside, Ava Bennett corrected the map. And this time, every kingdom present wrote down her name before using what she knew. The final meeting between Ava Bennett and Rowan Whitlock did not happen beneath silver banners. That was its first mercy. There was no royal hall waiting to turn pain into ceremony. No Luna chair polished for another woman. No council elder prepared to soften cruelty with polished language. No crowd eager to applaud whatever version of the truth made them most comfortable. Only a winter corridor in the neutral council house. Stone walls, frosted windows, low afternoon light, the smell of ink, cold wool, and extinguished candles. Ava had just finished the last session on emergency medical routes. Greyhaven's corridor plan had been approved across 4 territories, including Ashford. Not perfectly. Nothing important ever passed perfectly. But it had passed with names, funding, authority, and accountability written into law before the first major snowfall. That was enough to make her tired in a clean way. The good kind of tired. The kind earned from standing where she chose to stand. She was gathering her maps when Rowan appeared at the far end of the corridor. He did not call her name. He did not step close. He waited. That, too, was new. Ava looked at him. The old pain rose quietly. Not sharp now. More like touching a healed scar in cold weather. Still there. No longer open. "Alpha King Whitlock," she said. "Miss Bennett." Formal. Correct. Safe enough to continue. Eleanor Pike stood near the chamber door, holding a stack of documents and pretending not to watch with the intensity of a hawk guarding a wounded mouse. Ava glanced at her. "I will be a moment." Eleanor looked at Rowan, then back at Ava. One moment can become 2 if a man starts explaining history to make himself taller. Rowan lowered his gaze. Ava almost smiled. "I know." Eleanor left only far enough to remain visible. Good. Ava appreciated being trusted without being abandoned. Rowan stayed where he was until she came closer. Not too close. Neither of them crossed the old distance carelessly. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For the corridor vote? For that. And for Bellwether. Briar Glen. The grief office structure Isabella presented. The reforms that came from your ledger. The ones we should have built before you had to leave evidence behind." Ava listened. The words were careful, not smooth. That made them easier to believe. "Those reforms belong to the people who maintain them now," she said. "They began with you. They began because harm became visible." Rowan accepted that without flinching. Yes. The simple answer moved something in her. Not toward him, toward peace. Once, he would have defended himself from accuracy. He would have called it complicated. He would have spoken of councils, pressure, succession, image, and the kingdom's need for a future it could understand. Now he only said yes. Late, but clean. Ava looked through the frosted window. Outside, delegates crossed the courtyard under pale winter light. Noah Reed was speaking with 2 patrol captains near the gate. Isabella Crane stood beside Sister Margaret, reviewing grief office accommodation lists with a widow from the Southern District. Life had continued. Not beautifully, honestly enough. "I heard the Luna presentation was never finalized," Ava said. Rowan looked toward the same window. "No, Isabella." She petitioned to remain in Ashford as director of the grief office for 1 year, under public review by the widow board. Ava absorbed that. It was not a crown. It was harder than a crown. Good. And after 1 year? Her choice. Ava nodded. Choice again. The word had become the spine of every better thing. "And you?" she asked. The question surprised him. She saw it. Not because he had expected concern, because he knew he had no right to it. I remain king, he said, less comfortably than before. That may help Ashford. A faint, painful breath left him. Perhaps. Silence settled between them. Not the old silence. The old silence had demanded that Ava fill it, soften it, interpret it, survive inside it. This silence belonged to both of them and required nothing. Rowan reached into his coat slowly. Ava's body tensed before she could stop it. He noticed. Pain crossed his face. He withdrew his hand empty first, then said, "May I show you something?" Ava considered. Yes. Only then did he take out a small plain wooden box. Her breath stilled. Not because she wanted what was inside. Because some objects carried rooms inside them. He held the box with both hands, not offering it like a claim. Only showing. "The ring is here," he said. Ava looked at the box. The hidden lunar ring. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of private metal beneath a glove. 3 years of believing someday public courage would catch up to private tenderness. It had not. "What are you doing with it?" she asked. "I have not worn it, displayed it, or placed it in the royal vault. It did not belong to the crown. It never did." His fingers tightened slightly. "I brought it because I thought you should decide whether it is destroyed, returned, or buried somewhere no one can make a symbol of it again." Ava stared at him. There were apologies men gave because they wanted entry, and then there were acts that gave a woman back authority over the object that had once held her waiting. This was the second. It hurt more kindly. "Open it," she said. He did. The ring lay inside on plain cloth. Silver. Black moonstone. Ashford wolves carved along the band. Smaller than memory. That startled her. How could something so small have carried so much of her life? Ava reached out, then stopped. "May I?" Rowan's eyes changed. "It is yours to touch. Or not." Ava picked up the ring. It was cold. Only metal. Not fate. Not promise. Not future. Just a ring. Her hand did not tremble. She held it beneath the winter light and saw, clearly, the girl who had loved him with a patience so quiet even she had mistaken it for strength. Ava did not hate that girl. She would not insult her by calling her foolish. She had been faithful. She had been brave in the only ways allowed to her then. The failure had not been her devotion. The failure had been a man who accepted it without standing beside it. Ava closed her fingers around the ring once, then placed it back in the box. "Do not destroy it," she said. Rowan looked at her. "No. No, return it." "No." She looked toward the courtyard, where winter sunlight touched the road leading west and east at once. "Send it to the Ashford archive with the ledger record. Not as a royal betrothal piece. As evidence." His throat moved. Ava continued. "Let it be catalogued under the reforms. Private promise returned. Position vacated. Systems corrected after departure." Rowan lowered his head. "That is a hard mercy." "It is not mercy." He looked up. "It is accuracy." For a moment, pain and respect stood together on his face. Then he nodded. "Yes." He closed the box carefully. Ava felt no thread pull from her hand when the lid shut. That was how she knew. It was over. Not forgotten. Not undone. Over. Rowan held the box at his side. "I am sorry," he said. At last. No speech around it. No explanation folded inside. No but. Just the words. Ava heard them. Let them enter. Let them settle beside every other truth. Then answered honestly. "I know." His eyes closed briefly. Perhaps he had hoped for forgiveness. Perhaps he had feared it. She gave neither because neither belonged in that corridor, simply because he had finally found the correct sentence. "I will spend my life regretting it," he said. Ava looked at him steadily. "Then let regret make you useful." The words landed. Not cruelly. Precisely. Do not build statues out of remorse. Do not turn my name into a song men used to feel sensitive at banquets. Do not let Ashford praise me in deathly language while living women carry work without titles. Rowan listened. A king being instructed by the woman he had once placed beneath a sentence. Good. That was the shape of the ending she preferred. "If Ashford remembers me," Ava said, "let it be in payroll, law, clinic authority, widow seats, and named offices. It will. Not because you promise it." He flinched. Slightly. "Yes," he said, "because it will be recorded, audited, and challengeable." Eleanor would have approved. Ava almost smiled. Good. Another silence. This one held finality. Not dramatic. Clean. Rowan looked at her face for a moment longer than formality required, but not long enough to ask for what he had lost. "You are valued in Greyhaven," he said. "I know." The answer came without hesitation. That was perhaps the greatest change. She knew. Not hoped. Not waited. Knew. He absorbed it with visible grief. Good. Let him see that her value had not been created by his regret, only revealed after his absence from her life stopped blocking the light. The council bell rang in the distance. Delegates began moving toward the outer hall. Ava adjusted the maps in her arms. "I have another session." Rowan stepped aside, this time fully. No hesitation. No claim. No expectation that she pass close enough to remember tenderness. Only space. Ava walked past him, then stopped once. Not because she owed him more, because she owed herself the full truth. "Rowan." He turned quickly at the sound of his name. The first time she had used it since leaving. She let it stand for one breath, then said, "I did love you." His face changed. The old Rowan might have reached for that sentence like a door handle. This Rowan only stood still. Ava continued, "That was real. So was what you did with it." The words were not raised. They did not need volume. "I will not pretend I was untouched so I can appear stronger. I will not pretend you were always cruel so the leaving looks easier. I loved you. You hurt me. I left. I rebuilt. All of those things are true." Rowan's eyes shone, though no tear fell. "I know." "Yes," Ava said softly. "Now you do." Then she walked away. Eleanor joined her at the turn of the corridor. "Well," Ava looked ahead. "He apologized. Did you forgive him?" Ava thought about it. "No," Eleanor nodded. "Did you need to?" "No." "Excellent. Very efficient." Ava laughed once, quiet and real. They entered the council chamber together. Her nameplate waited at Greyhaven's table. Ava Bennett, medical corridor architect. The crooked paper lantern pin rested near her collar. Her maps were marked with winter routes. Her notes were sharp. Her coffee was terrible. Her authority was real. The chairman called the session to order. A dispute began immediately over funding distribution between Ashford and the northern settlements. Ava listened for 3 minutes, then stood. "No," she said. Every head turned. She placed one hand on the map. "If you fund by border status instead of fever risk, you will repeat Ashford's original failure under a more expensive name." Ashford's delegates looked down. Rowan, from the far table, did not defend himself. "Good." He wrote it down. Ava continued. "The route follows need. Not pride. Not proximity to power. Not houses with better banners." A northern delegate objected. A healer corrected him. Eleanor added a clause. Noah offered patrol capacity. Isabella produced grief displacement figures. Rowan approved the funding shift. Not as a favor. As governance. The policy passed by evening. Outside, snow began. First small flakes. Then steady white across the courtyard. When the council ended, Ava stepped outside alone. The world had gone quiet under winter. Greyhaven's carriage waited by the gate. Ashford's horses stood nearby, breath steaming. Delegates crossed the snow in dark coats, carrying documents that would change routes, funds, clinics, and names. Ava stood beneath the falling snow and held out one bare hand. A flake landed where the ring mark had once been. It melted instantly. No trace. She smiled. Not sadly. Not triumphantly. Simply. Across the courtyard, Rowan watched from a distance. He did not approach. That was his last gift. Or perhaps his first true one. Ava lowered her hand and turned toward Greyhaven's carriage. Peter loaded the maps. Eleanor complained about snow as if weather had personally insulted her. A young clerk asked whether medical seals should be copied tonight or tomorrow. Ava answered, "Tonight, if you want tomorrow to be survivable." The clerk groaned. Eleanor looked pleased. Ava climbed into the carriage. As it began moving east, she looked once through the window. Rowan stood beside Ashford's banner, the wooden box held carefully in both hands. Noah was near him. Isabella stood a little apart, speaking with Sister Margaret. They looked smaller from there. Not powerless. Not forgiven. Only no longer central. The road turned. The council house disappeared behind snow. Ava leaned back against the seat. For years, her life had been a corridor outside a throne room, waiting for a door to open. Now her life was a road. Cold sometimes. Difficult often. Hers. Greyhaven waited ahead with its canals, crooked lantern, terrible coffee, widows who argued with policy, healers who corrected maps, and a desk where her name stayed visible whether she was in the room or not. She would return there. She would work. She would rest. She would laugh when Eleanor insulted umbrellas. She would argue with merchants. She would build systems that did not require women to vanish before anyone recorded their value. And one day, perhaps, she would love again. Not because a story required it. Not because a woman's worth needed a new man to prove the old one wrong. Only if love came with daylight, witnesses, respect, and a door she could open from both sides. Until then, Ava Bennett was not waiting. That was the ending. Not a wedding. Not a crown. Not the Alpha King on his knees begging beneath a balcony while the kingdom wept. He regretted. He learned. He lived with the empty place he had created. She lived beyond it. That was better. Outside the carriage, snow covered the road east in quiet white. Ava looked at her bare hand one last time. No ring. No mark. No hidden promise. Only skin. Warm. Alive. Free. And when Greyhaven's first lanterns appeared through the falling snow, Ava Bennett did not feel like a woman returning from heartbreak. She felt like a woman arriving in the place she had chosen. At last, fully seen. At last, fully named. At last, no longer beneath anyone's promise but her own.